So hey guys, this is your favorite fanfic vortex. So in this video, we will see what if Naruto awakens the Slytherin power and become a Dark Lord. But before we start, remember to subscribe and like this video. Now let's start. Naruto Slytherin was certainly not a normal name. That was the first thought that came into mind of one Ines Takahashi when she reached on his roll call. The lad was handsome enough. At least as much as a 7-year-old could be. Tall enough to pass for an 8-year-old, the pale-skinned and narrow-jawed-faced child. Bore a similarity to none other than their leader, the 4th Hokage. She was here to demonstrate about the ninja academy and profession. The havoc that the Kyuubi had wreaked 6 years ago had been bad. Surely it could have been worse, but the fact that Konoha had to come to recruit in this remote orphanage a mile away from the village was a testament to the fact that the havoc wasn't something one could easily shrug off. Ines continued her scrutiny of the boy. Naruto had a mass of sun-kissed blonde on his head, combed neatly not to deter his range of vision. The boy was pale, almost as much as the snake Sannin Orochimaru. Blue eyes spitted like a snake didn't help. Ines almost giggled at the thought of the boy being a love child of the Yellow Flash and the snake Sannin. What do you know? Yaoi fangirls could be found even in the ninja force. Her efforts to restrain her giggle made her oblivious to the fact that the boy in question was looking at her with a satisfied expression. Or to be more blunt, at her chest. How long had it been since the Potter boy had ripped his soul from his body and pushed him to his death? An eternity it had been since the Dark Lord had been imprisoned in the stomach of the Death God. It could have been a day for that matter, since fickle things like time didn't bind someone like the very embodiment of the death. Death had surprisingly been content. No boiling water oil. No eternal tortures for his crime. Just content. No greed or desire. No bloodlust or the lust for carnal pleasures. As a result, he hadn't got bored. Until the Yondaime had summoned the Death God. Sealing the Kyuubi had gone better than it should. The Death God had called upon his infinite knowledge of the arcane arts and Fuinjutsu and mutated the 8 trigrams seal to the 16 trigrams seal. It had weakened the intricate relation in the host Narumi Namikaze Maybe and the Kyuubi to the point that there wouldn't be gradual mixing of their chakra, but Kyuubi could be sealed in its entirety and not needed to be split into 2 parts like it was about to before. Not a great sacrifice, Voldemort presumed. Unknown to the Dark Lord, however, it would prevent Narumi Fr. own developing an extreme chakra capacity as should have been. She would always have greater chakra capacity by virtue of being an Uzumaki, but it would never be as great as it could have been. Chunin. Level chakra levels were great at 13, but they would never be cage level like it could have been. Voldemort watched in grim amusement as the hand of the death was about to rip the soul out of the cage before they paused. Voldemort was more than shocked when death tore apart its own stomach with its hands and reached for a dark soul fragment before imbuing it in the other child. Within seconds, Konfu Scion gave way to horror and then to finality. The soul fragment was that Shinigami took was his own. When the other Namikaze twin, Naruto, perhaps, would die, he would drag Voldemort and would finally kill him. But not before Voldemort influenced him, and who knows, may even possess him. Voldemort finally, after decades of silence, laughed. The world shall fear the Slytherin name, once more. But alas, the Slytherin curse bloomed once more. Salazar Slytherin lost his parents to Muggles, initiating a war that took over 1,000 years to extinguish. Voldemort grew up without parents due to his Fa. Thayer abandoning him and his mother having gone insane. Naruto Slytherin was given up by his parents because of his inability to produce yin chakra and hence being born ultimately believed to be chakra-less. The fact that it was a temporary problem and was due to Naruto's body was adjusting to Voldemort's presence in his body was unknown. Minato believed that Shinigami had stripped Naruto of his chakra to pay for the sealing. Unknown to Minato, Shinigami had not killed Minato was due to Naruto having already paid the debt. Naruto would eventually kill Voldemort, and that was enough for the Shinigami. However, if small changes could create hurricanes, then what could big changes do? Minato had Hiroshima to Tsunade and instantly teleported her to Kushina and prevented Kushina from dying. Minato had promised on his will of fire to kill Shizune if Tsunade disagreed. Morals wouldn't save Kushina, Minato later said. Tsunade agreed. Naruto was confirmed to be chakra-less by Tsunade and he was Sei. NT to a remote orphanage to prevent Iwa from getting any notion of killing Naruto due to him being weaker in the later stages of life. Jiraiya would never end up in depression and would actually date Tsunade. But even the gutsy toad couldn't gather enough guts to propose Tsunade to this date. With the presence of Tsunade, Jiraiya, Sandaime and Yondaime Hokage, the other villages were dissuaded from attacking. People had their hope restored. Rebuilding was all that was left. Naruto was a normal boy. A little bookworm and a bit who loved attention but an all-around normal child. When he had boasted that he would unlock his chakra at 6, the caretaker had given him a second-hand scroll on chakra for his birthday. Every boy loved boasting and Naruto wasn't any different after all. So Naruto did the goat hand seal and focused. And suddenly the world changed. Before closing his eyes, he was Naruto. Just Naruto. Naruto with no name. No name associated with great fame or power. But after closing his eyes, he was Naruto with chakra. Just before opening his eyes, he was Naruto with chakra who knew something was wrong. Before fainting, he was confused. Was he a 60-year-old Dark Lord or a 6-year-old boy? And so our hero fainted. Naruto barely noticed though. He kept pushing. He took every feeling and emotion he had and pushed as hard as he could. He felt himself entering his mind. Then he entered someplace else. Somewhere new. He could hear an unearthly, blood-curdling scream as he crashed through a barrier. The scream of someone in agony. The same sort of scream that had been coming out of him. Then he realized where he was. He recognized it, somehow. It seemed oddly familiar. It seemed as if he was in his own mind. Or one very much likes it. But the horrible screaming told him otherwise. He was surrounded by what looked to be a giant cloud. It was completely black, except for small patches that were dark blue or blood red. There were jolts of electricity and energy running rampant inside it. The whole thing reeked of darkness. So much that it almost overwhelmed him. But there was something else. Something older and stronger than the darkness. It was a feeling of raw power. Power like he had never felt before. Naruto's chakra didn't hold candle to this sun in front of him. It was hypnotizing. It was calling to him, telling him to approach. Naruto yearned to touch it, to sink into it, and let it wash over him. He hesitated for a moment, unsure of what he should do. But the yearning feeling was too strong and he plunged straight in. He was overcome by the power. It smothered him, surrounding him on all sides. And as he absorbed it, he could briefly hear the screaming intensify. He could feel the power inside of him. It was twisting at his soul, bending it painfully. The pain intensified as the power connected with him. He could feel it attaching to him, welding itself to his own power. Then they combined as one, and his senses were overwhelmed. A horde of feelings and emotions came to him. Smells, tastes, sounds, and textures. Things he had never felt or experienced before. So much that it blinded him. A rush of memories came with it. Coming Imhei saw a young Tom Riddle as he put on the sorting hat, and took his place in Slytherin. He saw Riddle as he discovered his heritage. As he spent all his time in the library, in his quest for knowledge and power. He saw Riddle as he learned the unforgivables, as he killed his father, and drowned himself in the dark arts. Everything from Riddle's life and Voldemort's existence. And then the knowledge came too. More information than he could possibly imagine. The basics came first. The levitating charm, calming draft, and simple transfiguration. All the lessons from the first year to the OWL exams. Then harder things came. Human transfiguration, advanced charms, arithmancy, ancient runes, and magical creatures. The Polyjuice potion, the draft of the living dead, and Veritaserum. Subjects he couldn't have possibly studied before. The knowledge kept coming. Spells, potions, and ritual instructions that would never be found in the Hogwarts library. He learned the unforgivables in an instant. He learned hundreds of charms, curses, hexes, and jinxes. All in the blink of an eye. He learned the dark arts, deeper and darker than anyone save Morgana Le Fay herself. And Morgana fought Merlin himself. Rune magic, occlumency, and legilmency. He learned parcel magic and ancient spells long forgotten. Things only Voldemort knew. And still the lessons continued. He learned how to make port keys, how to apparate, how to duel, and how to fight with his bare hands. He learned alchemy, healing, ward magic, poisons, and antidotes. Languages he had never heard of, much less spoken. He knew all that Voldemort had learned throughout his life. And then it suddenly stopped. The rush faded away until he could hear Voldemort's screams once again. Those too faded as he felt himself being pushed out painfully. He could hear voices around him, but couldn't decipher the words. He tried opening his eyes, but lacked the strength. Moving his head slightly, Naruto gave a small groan and promptly blacked out. People waited and watched. Naruto was getting covered by a blue glow, blonde hairs levitating independent of gravity. And then it stopped. People almost rushed to congratulate him on unlocking his chakra. Prodigy would people of not the ninja clans would call him. And then the glow returned. Stronger and darker than ever. It continued till the glow got black. Killing Ent froze everyone in the area from anyone stopping him. And just after reaching a pinnacle of power, it disappeared. Naruto opened his eyes and whispered. Once a Slytherin, forever a Slytherin. Once a killer, forever a killer. Once a ninja, forever a ninja. Thankfully nobody heard him. Before fatigue could drag his soul to the loving and warm embrace of Mother Unconsciousness, Naruto spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. Occlumen's Maxima. Magic roared and flooded the body of the young boy. From the soul of the Dark Lord it manipulated the soul of the child and changed it in ways unfathomable. Soon Naruto's own soul was producing magic in quantities equal to a first year. Uzumaki factor was to blame for no small percentage. However, soon the magic came across a problem it never had came across. Magic needed a core. Magic needed a place to condense in. Why, the very idea of a magical being without magic was blasphemy. But it happened. So magic did what it had to do. It tried to create a magical core. And it failed. The laws of biophysical interactions prevented a presence of two energy cores in a body. If it happened, then they would be forced to fuse together. So Naruto's magic fused with his chakra system. Chakra system was forced to expand to hold this new energy. At 13, Naruto should have had a low Chunin level chakra. Now he would have chakra level just above of the famed copy ninja Kakashi himself. Magic also found something it hadn't found before. Tenketsu. The chakra points were used to expel chakra. Magic manipulated them to suit its own needs. Now Naruto could open and close them with a mental command. It wouldn't sound much, but the fact was that the entire purpose of hand seals and incantations was to open and control volume of energy released. And hence, Naruto would later learn that he didn't need many hand seals. Naruto's wandless capability increased by a large margin. He would always be dependent on a wand for purpose of more powerful spells, but he weaker spells would need nothing but intent and knowledge. Magic also found out abnormalities in Naruto's DNA. It was a little known fact, but there were no genetic abnormality in wizards which were not magical in nature. Magic corrected the normal non-magical genetic diseases to increase one's survival chances. Hence magic corrected. Uzumaki clan was descendant of the Sage of Six Path. Hence the Y had DNA markers of Uchiha and Senju family. The Rinnegan was present in low quantities and hence destroyed. The Sharingan was present in enough quantities for enhancing the eye vision but nothing more. The chakra chains were heavily present. They were simple, but the magic was never simple. It deemed the fact that the Uzumaki metal could take only chain forms to be faulty. Magic corrected it. The last was the Senju family's Mokuden. It was luckily present in just enough quantities to be salvaged. Naruto's elemental affinities were rewritten to be earth and water in equal quantities. The life-giving properties of Parseltongue had made the Dark Lord to be the best healer in the world. There was a reason why the symbol of medicine was a snake on a staff after all. The same life-giving property of Parseltongue Naruto gained from the Dark Lord. When combined with Mokuden DNA, Naruto became the second person in the world to wield the full power of wood release. As interesting, the working of physical world in Naruto's blood work was, it was his mind that took place. Occlumen's Maxima was a spell to reinstate one's occlumency shields to their full capacity. Occlumency was the defensive part of the mind arts. It not only organized memory and thoughts in impeccable way, it allowed mind to function at its maximum capacity. It allowed one to memorize and retrieve information at almost eidetic level. It also prevented one from going insane, like Naruto would have. All the information except the most vital had been locked away instantly. Now the only question to the mind was he Naruto or Voldemort? We use less than a 1% of our full capacity in day-to-day life. Magic prevented Naruto from going insane by using the full capacity. The answer was surprisingly easy for the mind working at its 100% capacity. He was both. Time to shake the world, once more. Waking up was a novel experience. His eyes were focused seemingly on the white ceiling of the infirmary. Why they had to go and paint the infirmary milk white of all color was beyond his reasoning. Colors like green and navy blue were much better. The color green gave him a pause. Green. Green and what? Green and blue. No. Green and silver. Yes. 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 Flashback. Ricky. Jack. The voice of the deputy headmistress came. As stern and intimidating as ever. It was probably a deputy thing considering how much it bore resemblance to McGonagall. Hufflepuff. The crisp and warm voice of the Sorting Hat pronounced. The applause of the Badgers was annoying. Ravenclaw and Slytherins were more disciplined at least. That certainly made the choice easier. Riddle. Tom. Slytherin. The voice of Sorting Hat was warm, but the looks on the faces of his housemates weren't. The life got a little more interesting. He-Man that would bring the wizarding world on its knees concluded. Flashback ends. The sun had not yet graced them with its presence. Before sunrise, his mind concluded. He couldn't estimate the time by moon due to lack of its sight. Tempest, Naruto whispered. Nothing happened. Tempest, Naruto said. Nothing again. Tempest, Naruto nearly shouted. The Dark Lord could cast the spell half asleep, without wand. Silently and without moving his hands an inch. The fact that Naruto couldn't, even with all aids, said only one thing. Oh crap. Never an interesting day in the Rin. Avada Kedavra. Nothing. Crucio. Nothing again. Imperio. The 4-year-old boy looked at the 6-year-old pointing a stick, recently broken from a tree, and pointing in his direction and yelling words in language unknown. The 4-year-old was confused, but at least he got candies. Good old bribing, the bread and butter of the Slytherin. The orphanage manager watched and shrugged off. Sanity was never the requirement in being a ninja. Just look at that Maida guy. The women shivered. She would never wear a green bikini again. Naruto focused. Then focused some more. Then some more. Then, well, you guessed it, some more. A sound resembling a tearing of packets of chips resonated in the area. And Naruto was gone. If somebody had been watching the area, they would have been shocked at 6-year-old boy disappearing with a crack of sound. If somebody had been watching an area 100 meters north of where Naruto disappeared, they would have been shocked at the sight of a 6-year-old appearing with a crack of sound. At least I can apparate. Naruto mused. Before he fainted due to magical exhaustion. The matron warned him of chakra exhaustion and then proceeded to eat his ear off with that nagging tone of hers. Damn, annoying women, Naruto muttered. For some reason, Voldemort's memories called upon images of a woman named Poppy. The question of who he was remained blissfully off his mind. Naruto Slythe. Rin sounded cool, so Naruto decided to take on Slytherin as his last name. Time for assessments. His vaunted potion skills and an O in newts were useless without proper ingredients. His charms sucked. His dark arts was so pathetic that Dumbledore would probably die of laughter. The Voldemort part of his personality mused, at least I can still kill Dumbledore. That is something. Apparition was go. OD enough for only once and an escape strategy at best. An unstoppable escape strategy at least, Naruto realized. There was no anti-apparition jinx or wards in this dimension. He had tried and was NK fully able to use levitation charm and the Incendio spell at least. Contrary to popular belief, Voldemort did occasionally delve into Muggle's sciences and fighting abilities. Voldemort unbelievably was a black belt in karate. A master of arts like Muay Thai and Taekwondo, and to top it off, Voldemort was a fan of Muhammad Ali. But Naruto's body unfortunately did not have any of these skills. His divination was good enough to win only lottery. His descent earnings from that were stashed under his bed in a box. Arithmancy was useless in these areas. His parseltongue was decent but without any dangerous snakes nearby. It was also useless. With absence of magical creatures in this world, his skills at care of magical creatures or COMC was not even worth mentioning. Ancient runes, rituals and alchemy skills were different. Ancient runes could be craved or drawn and fed on natural energy. It helped that the natural energy seemed to be a combination of natural chakra and ambient magic. Naruto tried to absorb this natural chakra to empower himself, but the runes were burnt off. The reason for it would become known to Naruto a decade later. He was trying to wield a combination of chakra and magic with only magical runes. Additionally, even if he succeeded, he would be unable to balance these energies and became a statue of stone instead of entering what is known as Sage Mode. The ancient runes were used by Naruto to lock his precious things. However, the biggest use Naruto discovered while using ancient runes was the Notice Me Not charm rune. Many charms could be forced into runic forms. This rune was known to prevent observers from focusing on the object the rune was applied to. Naruto could peek into a women's bathhouse like a pervert and not get caught. However, if he punched someone, then the rune would fail due to attention-seeking nature of his work. Naruto had decided to go to Konoha in the next year to see what he could learn of Fuinjutsu. The fact that Minato had been able to bind Shinigami with Fuinjutsu was nothing short of amazing. The thought of the Namikaze gave him a pause. Minato Namikaze had on one hand abandoned. On the other hand, it made somewhat sense. Voldemort insisted that Naruto moved on since Voldemort himself was used to being alone. Naruto was confused on what he should do. So Naruto buried the thought process and focused on his current problem. Where to get a wand? Naruto slammed his palms and focused. Wood eruption. The whisperings echoed in the empty clearing. Nearby snakes gathered due to the inherent nature of the fact that it was Parseltongue that the words had been hissed in. One thing that must be pointed here is that while Voldemort was penultimate sorcerer of the wizarding world and a genius with experience longer than that of most Muggles' lifespan, he knew nothing about the history of ninja. Or to be more precise, the history of Hokages or Konoha. For if he did, and then he would know the sheer importance of the Mokuden. What Naruto blew off as a manifestation of some druidic blood was in fact revered as the strongest bloodlines in the world. While it is indeed true that Mokuden was manifested due to dormant druid blood coming in contact with magic and chakra, it was much different than the wood manipulations of druids. The druids went extinct due to the limited applications of their abilities in combat. If the Dark Lord knew that unlike the druids, true Mokuden like Naruto's could create structures that made even the colossal Kyuubi no Yoko look dwarf, he would have definitely pondered its applications. But one couldn't deny a basic fact: Naruto had yet to show true Mokuden. Naruto's chakra at 6 years old was impressive as stated before, but the fact was it was impressive for a 6-year-old and not for a genin. Let alone for a legend like Hashirama Senju. One of the things that were spoken of about Hashirama Senju in revered tones was his humongous Biju-level chakra reservoirs that made Then the two-tailed Hellcat Nibi blush with embarrassment. So obviously Naruto with not even genin-level chakra couldn't even compare to him. One of the biggest reasons why the first Hokage needed such mammoth-sized chakra reserves was due to the chakra-taxing nature of Mokuden. A C-rank Mokuden took enough chakra to drain a standard Chunin dry. A standard Chunin could on the other hand, throw 3-5 full-powered C-ranked elemental ninjutsus like the Uchiha clan's traditional fire style, Great Fireball, before succumbing to chakra exhaustion. Hence it stands to reason why Naruto couldn't do anything substantial with Mokuden, yet. The important word being, yet. Wood eruption was the standard and the most basic E-rank Mokuden technique Naruto had invented. It was a basic technique to train his Mokuden. One thing Naruto had found was that the wood he generated was dependent on his thoughts and not on his chakra reserves. A wand of 15 inches erupted from earth. Thank God, Voldemort had arched into wand lores in his conquest of the Elder Wand. The wand of 15 inches was the best imitation of the Elder Wand that he could generate. 15 inches, elder wood, stiff and almost inflexible. It had taken a month to carve on wood with precision using a diamond needle. It was another peculiarity he had discovered with his body: he could generate any element with atomic number less than 30. The amount manifested was directly proportional to chakra utilized. The manifestation of Uzumaki bloodline from his mother, unknown to him. Naruto concluded that the amount of mass he conjured would come back into his body when vanished. That's why elements like hydrogen were a poor choice. When hydrogen combusted to give water, the chakra was lost and Naruto lost a humongous amount of chakra. Fully the amount of hydrogen lost was small at first and didn't put him into magical chakra exhaustion again. Elder Wood was chosen because of its high compatibility with most people. Although it sacrificed some power in long term, for short term it would have to do. A graphite cable thinner than his hair, conjured with chakra, Andy the core. The graphite core had been made using his bloodline too. The arithmancy and divination had given it a prediction of 73% to work out. It was more than enough for him. He had carved Sowilo, the same rune that he had carved onto Potter's forehead, into the handle to increase the spell accuracy. There was Thor, to increase lightning manipulation and increase magical output. There was a rune of luck because why not? The rune of Sun for his prodigious fire manipulation and symbol of growth. A rune of the Dementor's god king to bless his dark arts. The last was the rune of completion to bind his wand together. His arithmancy had calculated an increase of 8% chances of wand to work with these runes, hence he applied them. Runes were never traditionally applied on wands because it prevented weaker magic users from wielding it. But Slytherins were anything but weak. Completing the wand took a total of 2 months due to numerous tries and Naruto's high requirements. Do you even know how much a 6-year-old spends time on sleeping? The sleep was necessary for developing his chakra and magic properly, so he had to compromise. Additionally, Naruto started to work on his taijutsu a little. Not a lot, but just a few laps around the orphanage and a swimming race with his friends. Katas were rarely done in a single set of no more than a dozen times an evening. And then, the glorious moment of testing his wand came. His control on magic was strong enough to prevent even a minute amount of magic from leaking, a fact made necessity by his extremely limited reservoirs. Hence the wand was more or less a piece of decorated wood stick for a while. Then the magic was pushed through the wand. Magic is in many aspects like electricity, a fundamental force of nature, primitive and bound by laws of mathematics. The laws of maths are what as we know as arithmancy. Having said that, it is well known that every object is susceptible to electricity conduction in varying extent. The phenomena of resistance. Basically it states that electricity would have oscillator time running through some materials like iron and difficult time running through some like rubber. Magic is same in the sense that some magically conductive materials like a conductive wood of a wand is much better at conducting magic than an inert wood, so the resistance Naruto's magic found in way of its path at first was not surprising. Seeping slowly in the wood, it trudged through heavy resistance with raw determination. Determination to follow the instructions of its wielder to the end of the world. Alas, it found the core of the wand. The graphite core being made of his chakra and stained with his blood couldn't be more alive in terms of magic. Magic roared in the core. An interesting thing that should be mentioned here is that wands are never made out of magically inert objects. A wand is in a certain sense like an electricity cable. Hence the better the magical conductivity of wand the better medium it is. The wand is a conduit. It is an implement that links your own core to the environment. In a sense, your own core is powering up the core in the wand, which then allows the transfer of magic to the outside world. Or in simpler terms, spells. The resistance offered by a wand while casting magic is dozens of times less than that of while casting wandlessly. Additionally, the core of the wand also absorbs magic of the environment, allowing increasing one's net magical capacity. Naruto forgot the last part, and hence the moment his magical capacity suddenly increased by an order of magnitude, he was unprepared for the consequence. A gasp escaped his lips as a powerful current of magic surged through him. Naruto's eyes closed, and his body shuddered as his magic and chakra began to race in his chakra system. Magic and chakra in amounts more than he could handle were running through his chakra pathways. A Hyuga would have gone blind at the notion of looking at his chakra pathways. His body hence went to reflexes to sort out the problem. Release. His mind on the other hand was too busy to notice the building of energies in his chakra points, about to be released in a massive shockwave. It felt like a part of his soul was being restored to him. It was impossible for him to tell where he ended and where the wand began. Fortunately, occlumency settled and he came to attention. Releasing the energy as a shockwave was out of question. The shockwave would be powerful enough to cause fracture in the gates of Konoha a mile away. There was no way he could escape that. The pressure in his chakra system was getting painful and he had compressed it to maximum already. A release was needed in few minutes before the energies destroyed his body. Unknown to Naruto, his chakra density and potency was increasing at an alarming rate. It would unfortunately Lieutenant him in having one of the worst chakra controls in the academy in the history of Konoha no Sato. On the other hand, it would increase his quality of seals dramatically as well as increasing the potency of his key killing intent. Should he choose to learn shape manipulation in techniques like the Rasengan, spiraling sphere, it would even accelerate his growth rate. At the edge of his limit, Naruto pointed his wand at the sun and intoned, "Fidelio." The charm of Fidelius instantly settled, covering area of an acre. The charm was designed to keep a certainer under protection. The caster was generally the secret keeper. Without the secret keeper telling the secret, no one could come in the area. It was the single most magically expensive non-destructive spell in his arsenal. His chakra, however, needed to be expelled too. His magic had tried to overpower his chakra, but chakra had quickly countered by rapidly increasing his production rates. Chakra meant to be produced in months had been produced in seconds. It wasn't without consequences. Naruto could already foresee a month or two in coma. Naruto casted a stasis charm on himself to prepare for coma. It was a testament to the power of his wand that even after casting a bloody Fidelius, he could cast a charm like coma stasis. To handle chakra, Naruto employed Mokuden. Its chakra expensive nature did come in utilization. Would release eruption. An overpowered version of the only Mokuden technique Naruto knew manifested. Acres of nothing but wilderness of flats were instantly converted into the most vividly varied garden full of plants. Before falling to coma, Naruto wondered if he was hallucinating. Most of the plants were magical in nature. Naruto fell into coma pondering the utility of it. Waking up from chakra exhaustion was getting a familiar experience. But waking up with sky as your ceiling wasn't familiar. Noticing and cancelling the stasis charm around him with a finite incantum, Naruto got up. Looks like he wasn't hallucinating when he saw those magical plants. Tempest. The spell worked and he instantly knew he had been in coma for over 2 months. Damn, he missed his birthday. His body had not atrophied due to stasis and he was feeling good if a little stiff. Time for work. Taking the wand again, he could feel the magic rush once more. His magic. Roaring to be let out, Naruto demanded control to the arcane energy. Naruto's magic rebelled, but a will of iron crushed it. Instantly taking control of it and collecting it within his chakra system, Naruto forced it to smoothen itself out. Like a butcher chopped his meat, his cleaver never touching the bone by virtue of nothing more than experience and talent. Naruto had over a half of century of nothing but experience of a Dark Lord. Magic was smoothened and broken into uncountable threads of thickness so less that human hair would look like pillars of a bridge. His magical control was back once more, better than ever. At a cost to his overall magicka. Capacity sure, but it would grow to full capacity in the next decade. Who knows, it might even exceed even more. It was a terrifying thought. Dark Lord had the magical capacity equivalent to Sanbi's chakra reservoirs. To even exceed that was nothing short of divine. Dumbledore himself had only 3 Ku capacity. Soon, the Slytherin family would boast of Naruto Slytherin, whose magical capacity exceeded even the divine reserves of Merlin himself. Shaking of the delusions of youth, Naruto caused his magic to coalesce at a single point, ready for action. It was only when he restricted his magic Naruto noticed the variations in his vision it was causing. Naruto didn't dare breath for fear of it being a dream. For sure it couldn't be nothing more than dream. He the Dark Lord, having the eyes of light. Naruto completely withdrew all the chakra in his eyes, dimming and weakening his eyesight. Then his magic flooded his eyes. Surely the world brightened, colors unexplainable and images in ways he couldn't comprehend due to sheer absence of experience. A normal guy in the elemental nation has an 20/20 vision. A normal ninja has a vision of 20/15 vision due to development of chakra and chakra enhancing their body. A Junin and a Kage have a vision of 20/12. Hyuga Hiyashi was the only one in elemental nations who could claim a 25th vision like a hawk when he had his Byakugan activated at full power. Naruto was sure that he was viewing a world at a 28th vision at least. But apart from being able to see a mother crow feeding its child at least a mile away, Naruto could see some more. Oh, so much more. He could see his magic, chakra, manipulations as well as fluctuations of magic in his Fidelius and even the seals of chakra made by Mito Uzumaki herself on the gates of Konoha with clarity and understanding unparalleled. He had the mage sight, a gift so rare that it was considered to myth by even the majority of scholars. But Voldemort had the once-in-a-century chance of glimpsing on these eyes all those years ago. In the historic battle of 1979, Death Eaters had invaded the Department of Magical Law Enforcement and had engaged in a battle against the Aurors. The battle could have gone either way until he came. Voldemort had gained true terror that day, killing and destroying in a rhythm of music and magic only he could hear. Dancing a dance of death only he could predict. Bones' family of over 3 dozens of members had been reduced to near extinction. The Pruitt family name actually went extinct considering that Molly Weasley had married away. It was easier than icing through butter with a burning cleaver till Dumbledore came. His transfigurations had matched Voldemort's dark arts. Conjurations for killing curses, animations for Cruciatus, occlumency for Imperio. It was a close battle till Voldemort unleashed his elemental powers. Fiendfire Maxima, a spell banned by King Arthur and Merlin himself, had made short work of everything Dumbledore could create. While Morgana Le Fay could reduce entire cities to ashes with the spell, Voldemort could barely reduce Ministry to ground, but it was enough. It had tipped the battle in the favor of Voldemort enough for him to sneak in a Cruciatus at the headmaster. Fun fact number 89: Cruciatus by the Dark Lord can only be broken if the Dark Lord is distracted, if he runs out of power, or if the victim is Dumbledore. Dark Lord had enough juice to cruciate the blue-eyed man for a day or two. It looked to be the day Voldemort would finally crush Order of Phoenix, but then the eyes of Headmaster morphed and the Cruciatus shattered like glass. It was a day the Dark Lord would recall with great longing. Finally the bloodlust of Headmaster broke through the facade of the kind grandfather he had created for others. The Headmaster had at last unleashed a fury and a hurricane of destruction that swept the Dark Lord away. The Headmaster had quickly transfigured everything around them to anything and everything the Dark Lord could imagine. The legendary fires of Morgana Le Fay had been engaged once more. But they met the unbending legendary eyes of Merlin that simply refused to burn. The catastrophic collateral damage had been without a doubt a stuff of legend. The only way to defeat the Fiendfire Maxima had been to use the finite Maxima at 8 weak points of the fire at exactly the same time. Since nobody could wield 8 wands altogether, the Dark Lord was assured that he would win, but Dumbledore's resolve had been proved to be greater than the Dark Lord's lust of power. The mage sight allowed the Headmaster to manipulate and split his magical rope into uncountable magical threads of thickness non-existent, extremely amplifying his control. The fires stood no chance and had no choice but to fall back into their realm. The Dark Lord would fall back not too later. The mage sight allowed a person to view the magic in a very literal sense. Manipulations of magic were amplified and the costs of magical spells were reduced by a great degree. Transfiguring was much faster and convenient with little to no magic wasted. Charms and dark arts of an opponent were read before they were even casted. Unfortunately, unlike Sharingan, it couldn't copy or predict spell a person didn't know beforehand. Potions skills took a boost because one could actually see what was happening with the magical patterns of the ingredients in a cauldron. Predicting and manipulating what to do was child's play to a person skilled in magical theory of ingredients. Ancient runes and alchemical skills were something that a user of mage sight could draw with a precision unmatched. Any imperfections in the circle of alchemy or the matrix of a rune could be seen as providing resistance to magic and removed or smoothed out. Occlumency was increased to the point that they were indestructible shields. Divination was never really considered a magical discipline and mage sight didn't have any advantage to clear this controversy. But such powerful abilities weren't without their drawbacks. The sheer magical amount needed to activate and use mage sight would leave even Dumbledore in the hospital wing. Voldemort had theorized after his defeat at the hands of the mage sight that using mage sight at full power for a prolonged periods and repeatedly would decrease the magical consumption. However, the magical consumptio is incredible. Even during the first stage, Naruto pondered morosely. Naruto had run out of magic in using mage sight for less than 2 minutes. Evolving the mage sight required the ability to keep mage sight active for a week. Some quick arithmetic and divination calculations predicted Naruto to be able to achieve that feat when he is in his early 20s naturally. That was a feat considering even in his pinnacle of magical prowess, Dumbledore failed to activate the second stage. The key word however is, naturally. There were great deals of rituals of darker nature which could accelerate his development. Morality and legalities were overrated anyways. Naruto had no intention to go to the goody two-shoes way. Historically, Mage Sight was said to consist of 2 confirmed levels and a third final hypothetical level. Naruto's eyes were currently in the first stage identified by a huge iris and the rest of eyeball being colored killing blue. In outer ring there was a single comma. Known to Naruto, his eyes looked like a blue-colored one-tomo Sharingan. Link on profile. The second stage was achieved only by Merlin and were said to consume humongous amounts of magic. It was said to amplify abilities, but the details were sketchy. Hence a way to activate the second stage was what he needed to find on his own. Any chance of text or research surviving to this world was slim. Hence experimentation was what he needed to do. The third stage was purely hypothetical and was predicted by Merlin. Naruto had much more chance to activate second stage if he focused purely on second stage. Third stage was reserved for later ponderings. For now, he had work to do. Potions it is. It was with great joy that Naruto discovered the fact that most of his plants were magical, and to top it off, it had 90% of essence of versatility. One of the rarest plant and perhaps the most expensive potion ingredient in the wizarding world. The crop in front of him was worth perhaps 3/4 of the Malfoy fortune. The reason for the mind-boggling cost was extremely lengthy procedures and ingredients with its one leaf. Veritaserum for instance took over a month to brew by normal means. It would still require 8 hours a day of constant supervision, however. Add a leaf of this essence into water, fire whiskey and give a stir clockwise. Heat and concentrate. Voila! Powerful Veritaserum in less than a minute. However, the idiots of the ministries around the world had driven the plant to near extinction. Voldemort had in over half a century years had heard the plant in use only once. During the World War II by Grindelwald, Voldemort had suspected Department of Ministry to hoarding all the supplies of the invaluable resource. It was true, although Voldemort had failed to get his hands on it. Naruto could see various ingredients and infinite combinations of potions, and his mind was running at rates faster than his brain. The mental stress was more than his brain could take. Magic took hold. Unknown to Naruto, his mage sight had activated once more to allow his comprehension to increase tenfold. Naruto during mental stress was currently adjusting to his mindset. Oblivious to the drain of his magic, Naruto finally completed his list of potions, decreasing his mental stress and causing his multicolored eyes to turn blue once more, followed by shrinking of his iris. The sclera of his turned white once more. What was the first minor crime the Dark Lord did? That was one of the questions nobody bothered to ask. His murder of Myrtles and opening of Chamber of Secrets is all they seemed to be concerned with. Perhaps it did outshadow things like using legitimacy on the heir of the Odin family to steal the recipe of fire whiskey. Surprisingly, fire whiskey was not more than a mixture of a liter of water and a drop each of calming draught, peace draught and intoxicating draught. A stolen family spell, and Naruto had few dozen liters of the fire whiskey. For emergencies, obviously, a Mortentia was brewed for 3 to 5 doses. The world's strongest love potion does not create real love, just powerful obsession. A handy potion for sure. Aging potion that, depending on the amount taken, would age him to various ages, for an hour or two. Anti-paralysis potion, a potion that heals paralysis. Antidote to common poisons, a potion that reverses the effects of common poisons. Antidote to uncommon poisons, a potion that reverses the effects of uncommon poisons. Antidote to Veritaserum, a weak babbling beverage with a modified weak strain of Veritaserum to get his suspecting victims to talk a lot more than they intended. Beautification potion for those desiring beauty for an hour and two. Naruto made certain to brew multiple doses because of high-selling potent teal amongst the rich civilians hoping to bag famous ninjas like Kakashi Hatake. A dose or two of fire resistance potion. 10-second acne vanishers for teens facing problem of acne. Blood replenishers, Skele-Grow, essence of Dittany. Lung clearing potions, burn and boil healing paste, wound cleaning potion and scar removers constituted a majority of his medical supplies. Calming Draft was one of the first he brewed. Draft of Living Dead was his incapacitation potion, while Draft of Despair was his torturing potion. Draft of Dragon could kill a dragon with a mere vial. Naruto made sure to make 17 vials of the stuff. Erumpent Potion was his answer to the expensive explosive tags. Everlasting Elixir could be used to prolong effect of his ink and allow his pens, brushes and quills to run forever. Unfortunately he could make only 2 vials of Liquid Luck. Grand Pepper Up and Normal Pepper Up solutions for the more draining days. Laxative potions were brewed for purely pranking. His mother was Kushina Uzumaki after all. An all-purpose magical stain remover to remove stains. Polyjuice was brewed to overcome the problems in Henge that Voldemort's insight provided. For e.g., no actual transformation. Strength Potion enhanced his strength temporarily with severe side effects. Naruto made 3 vials of that. It took a while to gather his resources. All the brewing had taken a toll on his reserves. Fire, which was reliable, and extractions alone from plant took a lot of time. Makeshift transfigurations provided him a copper cauldron. He would have to get a cauldron of gold later. Gold brewed the fastest, followed by copper, which brewed at only a third of speed. Pewter the Dead last brewed at a quarter of speed of copper. Unfortunately, gold could not be conjured, transfigured with th. Thankfully a majority of his product was water taken from a lake, which allowed him to brew so much of potions. However, now all he was left with were the non-magical plants, many of which were expensive in the Muggle world, and potions. Even the essence of versatility could not overcome time acceleration and ingredient limitations simultaneously in most cases. So to compensate, Naruto had to increase the brewing time. Calming Draft for e.g. could be brewed in a day took a month, so that time could be saved for more time expensive drafts like Liquid Luck, which took over 6 months to brew, normally. With Essence of Versatility and absence of Skelegro, it would take well over 3 years to brew. Arithmancy Mastery had never been something Voldemort had been so glad for. Up until now, as it was he still took over 2 months for the now 7-year-olds to get ready to head in the direction of Konoha. It took quite a while for him to reach Konoha, mentally adding stamina training in his to-do list. Spending an hour to travel to a mile was seriously irresponsible. He could only apparate once, and he knew better than to waste it. He was aware of the curious gazes of the gatekeepers and the higher ninjas passing by. Or more specifically those who were on one-on-one basis with the Yondaime. Filling the form took less than a minute, and the moment he entered in Konoha, he stiffened. Voldemort was well aware whenever people were looking at him. Naruto had received it too. He was instantly overwhelmed as a result. On initial inspection, nobody was really looking at him, just going about their daily business. His high-quality black kimono did draw some looks, but his noble features caused people to label him as a scion of a very wealthy family and move on. Thankfully, wizarding robes and Japanese kimonos had only little differences wherever it truly mattered. Hopefully, his transfigurations would last for a week or so. Naruto headed for the library. The ninja won first. It was with Gray. At Joy, Naruto discovered that civilians had access to up to academy student level stuff, and since Genin Library was barely monitored, he was able to sneak in easily. A fact about occlumency: while it allowed one to devour the enormous Genin Library and Academy Library in less than an hour, it didn't allow one to comprehend it at the same rate. Think of it like having a book with you in an exam you have never sat in before. Sure, you can look in the book and recite the facts word to word. It didn't allow one the understanding that came with reading text, pondering it, and finally manipulating the raw data into one's understanding. In class of 30 students, each student will comprehend the same book differently and will understand it differently. This difference allows our brain to recall information at an impeccable rate. Naruto knew he would have to meditate for months if not years on what he had read in less than an hour to be able to understand what he had read. Knowing he would have his entire life to break into the rest of the library, Naruto headed to the civilian library. The biggest civilian library in the elemental nations. Naruto was in the end really glad that he came into Konoha at 7 of morning. Reaching the civilian library by 9:30 allowed him the 7 hours necessary to cram the entire library. Thankfully many of that were dry facts, like the measurements of Konoha's parks and its toilets. They didn't any comprehensions. Still, a majority of things like ninja history, theory of chakra and functioning of Konoha politics were in civilian library and required his attention. All of this stuff would take sun and cram. Naruto would take 4 years if he was correct. 8 months if he could sustain mage sight for long time, but it was impossible. The best way would be to sacrifice a virgin and comprehend his every memory in less than a year, but where would he get a virgin? Resolving himself for 4 years of mental boredom, Naruto moved on to Konoha's hospital. Shizune Kato had been all but 3-year-old when her parents died. A year later she lost her uncle and would consequently hung for a year with the legendary Slug Princess, who was the closest thing she had for a mother. A while later she developed her first adoration with Minato Namikaze, who avenged her parents and uncle. It was with great reluctance she would understand that the Yondaime had threatened Tsunade with Shizune's life. When she would fully understand it she would laugh it off. While she wasn't in leagues of Hitaki Kakashi or Uchiha Itachi, she did have her skills. A chunin at 12 was nothing to brag about considering the fact that Itachi was Anbu when he was younger than her, but it was something. While she did understand the need of low-level ninjas to do low-level work, but she was a chunin, damn it. Her speciality with poison had given her a chunin jacket, and her chunin jacket had made her a poison purchaser. She would check and purchase poisons and its ingredients. A dreadful job in reality. So she was pleasantly surprised when a seemingly near 9-year-old came to talk to her. He was everything that was non-ninja. Wealthy, new in clothes which were without a single smudge on them. Cute, aristocratic, and a heart charmer in preparation. Well-kept blonde hair who seemed to have never experienced a dust breeze. Pale skin which seemed to have never been graced by the presence of the fiery sun. An easy and polite smile on his face without a hint of malice. Till one saw his eyes. Oh, till one saw those windows of the soul. Malice and greed flowed like water and salt in the great oceans. Neither unwilling to give in to the domination of other fickle things like morality would only be devoured by the might of the tsunami. Blue eyes like ice chips were forced to give way by the penetrating slit of his eyes. Instantly, her body stiffened as if flooded by killing intent. Her spinal reflexes preparing herself. Heartbeat tripling before she could count. Her fingers counting the kunais she had. Kidneys pumping adrenaline. Her mouth going dry, but her eyes didn't move from those unholy eyes of the devil. She started evaluating him before her soul could be devoured. He had no weapon, no musculature, and no calluses to indicate shinobi training. His chakra reserves were less than her own, but she was terrified of him. Her soul was begging her to run. Her mind did not understand why she feared him. When Inez had joked about a boy being love child of Yondaime and Orochimaru, she had laughed. It didn't so funny anymore. "Are you done ogling me?" the boy asked in a humored tone. Shizune was stunned and hence did the only thing she could. She blushed. Tsunade Senju had a twitch in her eye as she took in the view before her of the most recent poison and herb seller before her. Generally it was the work of Shizune, but the young chunin had insisted on passing the job to her. It rarely happened, and mostly if the costs of the herbs exceeded 10,000 ryo, and such was the case today. No, the reason for her twitch was the steady thumb of chakra she could feel. Having such a legendary control meant that her chakra sensing skills at a close range were legendary as well. So it stands to a reason that she could feel the developed chakra system of the herb seller as well. The boy could pass as a carbon copy of his father. But that damned smile was all of his godfather. The smile that said he knew. He knew that she had discovered his above average for his age chakra reservoir. Oh god, Kushina was going to be a nightmare. The slug princess thought, horrified in a long time. When the slug sage would discover the fact that the poisons alone would be worth more than 1,000,000 ryo and hence require her to call a village council meeting and notify them of Naruto. She would finally break her vow to never drink again. A vow that had lasted for a whooping 2 hours and 3 seconds. Whooping for the slug princess at least. A month later, the Nadaime Hokage Senju, Tobarama, had been cursed for many decades for many things and would probably be cursed for few decades more. But he had been cursed the most for his ACCT of creating the village council probably. On second thoughts that distinction probably goes to paperwork. Hashirama was quite a carefree and lazy ass, so village council is technically on second position. Unless we count in Uchiha police force. Anyways, What we do know is that the history of Konoha's council is really longest, and since nobody gives shit about it, it is mostly forgotten. Hell, the only place one could find entire history of Konoha's council is underneath the bed of one Mitarashi Anko in a box on which there is a label that says, "For use on Orochimaru only." Now that the severity of situation has been explained, FFICE to say a summary would appease most. There is no real council, only the Hokage has all the power since a Konoha is a hidden village and a military is effectively handled only in a dictatorship. But once in a while all the clan heads, advisors of the Cage and the leaders of various civilian guilds would assemble into presence of their leader and talk intellectually. Again, only the clan heads and the advisors would talk. The civilians, for the lack of better word, kept bitching around. However, they knew never to step past their boundaries. All it takes is a psychopathic ninja to go all Chia Itachi on their ass and they would be done for. But this arrangement was a benefit in various matters. Take a matter of just today, a plant merchant would be negotiating for a contract worth over 1 million ryo, and if there was one thing that ninjas couldn't do was negotiation. So like always, the negotiation would be headed by civilian guilds, and if the elder felt that they couldn't negotiate satisfactorily, they would step in. Kaharu and Homaru of the elders would take up the mantle and finish negotiations on behalf of Minato Namikaze. Naruto had never been as thankful for the experience of negotiation of over 5 decades that the Dark Lord had as of the moment when Tsunade of the Senju clan had informed him that he would have to sell his plants in midst of council. More importantly, in front of that man. The date was nearly a month later and Naruto's childlike nature had emerged once more. Naruto wanted to do something cool, and for once the Voldemort aspect of his personality had accepted. Intimidating the civilians and generating a mediocre amount of interest amongst most of the strongest ninjas of the village in a single move was too much of an opportunity to miss out on. On back of Naruto's mind, the fact of impressing his father was there, but Voldemort failed to consider the notion. So without any stop, he had managed to polish his apparently horrendous chakra control and learn a single jutsu seamlessly from the village library. He had discovered that he seemed to have an affinity for reduced hand seals for justice. And since the jutsu in question had only one hand seal, it had been eradicated altogether. The jutsu was something that almost all special Junin knew, and it was as common as breathing on higher levels. Only chakra reserves were the problem. So the fact that Naruto could even perform it at mere 7 years of age was beyond anything normal. Now time to perform. Showdown time. Danzo Shimura was slightly surprised at the young age of the apparently aristocrat merchant. Those kimonos were certainly aristocratic. But if those eyes were anything but aristocrat, they had the sharpness and cruelty a Cage would be hard-pressed to match. Anything but aristocrat indeed. Danzo murmured, with his eyes making an obvious connection in the blue-eyed, fair-skinned and blonde merchant with that of the similarly blue-eyed, fair-skinned and blonde Hokage. The negotiation. Nobody was much interested in this topic. An average of 4 topics were discussed in an average meeting. This had been deemed the least important and probably boring. Danzo made himself comfortable in his seat. He had a feeling that this topic was going to be anything but boring. The slow pace of negotiations were continued for a while. Then it happened. The head of the weaponry guild had made an offhand comment about the Slytherin's young age, when the Slytherin stuck back with the viciousness of a viper. 15 minutes. That was how long it took from there for the 7-year-old to rip apart the entire civil council. 15 civilian heads in 15 minutes. The tongue of the boy was alternating between dripping in honey and the very poisons he was selling. At last, when the boy had mana G'd to squeeze every single drop of money from the merchants, had Kaharu and Homaru decided to intervene. It was like watching a storm ravaging a wall of iron and concrete. The boy certainly had a fitting name. Maelstrom. He certainly stuck like one. He never defended because he knew that no weapons could come close to him. Dodging and parrying the verbal blows of his ex-teammates with the grace NCR edibly like his father possessed on a battlefield, all the while prodding and analyzing the impermeable defense of the elders. But the walls of the elders remained firm. Then, the eyes of the Maelstrom flashed once more. The split of snake were longer as visible. At the moment any hint of resemblance to the snake Sanin was gone. Danzo vowed to face palm at the obnoxious nature of those who even now couldn't connect the dots. When he was in seclusion off course. Face-palming without reason in midst of negotiation meant senility and probably insanity. Danzo was anything but senile, insane, maybe. The only reason he didn't warn his fellow council members was to sat his curiosity. Curiosity was said to have killed the cat, but Danzo would indulge it once because his feeling had came back stronger than ever. He had feeling that what would happen now would be talked for a decade and who knows even more. The negotiations continued after a short break. The maelstrom had stilled. Winds of air had become gentle breezes possessing no longer the power and destruction they had once. The grace had simply vanished. The boy had simply lost the will to negotiate seemingly. A slight triumphant curve of lips was visible on faces of his teammate and even the defeated civilians. But it was a resonance of the heartbeat of the old war hawk that said that the calmness was but the one before storm. A look on the faces of the clan heads, his rival Hiruzen and even the Hokage told him even they had felt it. They would be wrong. It wasn't a storm that Naruto was waiting for. It was a tsunami. Omura had but mentioned the offhand comment of the head of weaponry guild when a menacing grin manifested itself on the face of the obviously namikaze. It became apparent to all how outclassed the elders were when they Slytherin ripped control of the political machinations from their hands with an obviously powerful homework he had done. Give an inch and they would take a mile had never been obvious. When Kaharu tried to appease the boy and the boy's sheer greed would shine through. Yet it was a beast chained by his shrewdness and hence there was little they could do to exploit it. Before the day would be over, Slytherin would be one interesting millionaire with perks that would be cause of jealousy for much of the civilian council. By your leave, Hokage-sama. Naruto tried his best to keep tiredness out of his tone. It was only thanks to everyone underestimating him that he had managed to come out at top. Next time they would be doing their research on him and he would have to step up the game. Nevertheless, it was pretty tiring. It was only due to occlumency. Naruto kept his emotions in control when Voldemort's skill at reading body language allowed him to pick up traces of pride in Minato's body language. When Minato's nod came, Naruto breathed and prepared his chakra for one final maneuver he was going to pull. Turning to exit, leaves came to revolve around him and he whispered, "Body flicker." It was only due to his magic accelerating his body growth to nearly 2 years ahead that he was able to handle the stress on his chakra network and body itself before he disappeared. However, the stress he endured was nothing as compared to the stress he had left in the village council where a 7-year-old boy had pulled off a seal-less body flicker. A trick which actually caused Shisui Uchiha to get an A-rank bingo book bounty. Tsunade face-palmed. Oh shit. She could feel Kushina polishing her swords already. The thoughts evaporated like dew in under sun's glare when she felt someone stare. Her honey-colored orbs met cerulean stone. Eyes of the Hokage once filled with love and compassion were now little more than glaciers of ice. Oh shit indeed. Confusion wasn't so nothing that had much familiarity to one Minato namikaze. In a world where survival was determined by your cunning and hard work, having the attributes aplenty meant that you were destined for success on a straightforward road. Similarly, frustration was something he didn't know how to deal with either. But for once in his life, he was confused and frustrated. They said that he was the strongest Hokage till date. Did it the statement had any substance to it? Feeling completely exhausted, the fourth shadow of Konoha no Sato thought that perhaps answer was a no. Determination was a currency he thought he was rich in. Only to found that the particular account had finally gone bankrupt. A smell of rosy smoke permeated the office of Hokage. The Namikaze family had been a rich civilian family. Lee in Konoha with Minato becoming the first shinobi of the family. Minato's mother was a bit more in touch with her religious type that would light the rose-scented incense every morning, a smell Kushina said he was addicted to. He disagreed. Namikaze family prior to being annihilated in Third Shinobi World War had been a one-of-kind place. Even their lack of ninja training had been compensated with money when, at a young age of 6. His training had been passed to an expensive professional shinobi instructor. Something that had helped him greatly in the long term. His Hokage hat was placed on tea table and his robes were hanging from the wall along the east. It was times like these when he wondered whether he should start smoking like his predecessor before he extinguished that thought awning smoking not being worth the risk of lung cancer. His sensei was sitting in the window deep in thought for once. Eyes closed, meditating and trying to find his focus. None of his perverseness and jovial nature disturbing the sage. In informal clothes, in guest chairs sat his predecessor lazily lightly chewing on his tobacco pipe in his mouth. Only an expulsion of thick smoky cloud being released. Ed from the other end did indicate that the god of shinobi was even breathing. Tsunade had gone to pick up some files for the upcoming confrontation. Minato made sure to send Kakashi with her so that she didn't ditched out on them. Naruto had left the meeting barely a quarter of a day before. With how fast gossip seemed to travel amongst the civilians, Minato knew that Kushina probably heard rumors hours ago. While Kushina was far from a gossip monger, she did keep an ear out for them. Women nature perhaps. Having living together for well over a decade, Minato liked to think that he knew Kushina enough to make an educated guess of her next actions. She would probably pick up Narumi from the playground, arrange for a babysitter, probably the red-eyed Kurenai Yuhi, go to Inuzuka soon, end firm rumors and then wait for him to come home. But Minato knew that going home empty-handed wouldn't do, so he waited. Kushina would soon think that something had happened and would come to Hokage Tower. Moments later Tsunade entered and Kakashi was dismissed. Found anything? Minato questioned, hoping to find out what exactly had caused such a problem in the first place. The auth at the slug PR. Incess indicating that they were listening as well. Hence, they were reasonably disappointed when the Senju Kunoichi shook her head. Before she could explain further, they were interrupted by a knock on the door. Minato-kun, can I come in? The polite voice of his wife came from the other side of the room. Tsunade looked fearfully at Minato, wondering what he was planning. Come in, Kushina-chan. Minato replied back. Hearing his assent, the red-headed women entered the room and took in the smell of the rose-haired incense and the sight of the other cage-level ninjas. That being done, she looked straight at her husband and began the conversation with a somewhat hard tone. I hope you know why I am here. Years of living with Minato had taught many things to the red-haired Uzumaki. One of them was that Minato was perceptive not only in battle but outside it as well. He probably had guessed her actions beforehand if the presence of 3S-ranked ninjas around her were any indication. It was the exact reason why she hadn't simply attacked Minato or Tsunade, because probably Minato was prepared for it. Yes, the rumors were correct. This caused the tension in the room to increase 100-fold. The anticipation in the room nearly suffocating. Kushina for her part deep in thought instead of the expected anger. She was smart enough to know that even though Minato probably was trying to doctor contingencies in case she acted irrationally, she knew the odds were not in her favor. Minato was too much in his realm for Kushina to gain an upper hand. She needed to do something unexpected. Something Uzumaki. So Naruto is. Kushina left the statement hanging. Minato warily nodded. It makes so much sense, you know. Kushina solemnly said. Minato's head snapped up, surprised. What? The others were also stunned. What made sense? Everything. Why third Hokage allowed Orochimaru to walk away? Why Orochimaru defected in the first place? Why you were made the fourth Hokage instead of the third's beloved student? If everyone else weren't confused before, they were definitely now. Kushina-chan, you are making no sense. Minato tried to interject into the weird situation. He had expected an angry Kushina. He had expected a crying sad Kushina. But this, don't call me that, you disloyal pig. Everyone's jaw dropped and the situation's weirdness seemingly reached the crescendo, but it hadn't. Without any further delay, Kushina roared. Orochimaru was pregnant with your child, wasn't he? The thoughts of everyone can be summed up in one word or perhaps one abbreviation. WTFH. Seeing their expression, the only A-rank kunoichi of the room gained a glint in her eye. Now was her opening. With a swish of her hand, she channeled chakra into the seal on palm of her right hand. The seal dissolved into smoke, leaving an uncovered sharp katana in its wake. Kushina's eyes were on her target. She lunged towards her victory. Moments later, scream of a girl was heard. Outside the Hokage's office, their clothes finally divested, Miki tenderly reached for the manliness of her lover. The moment her hands came in contact with his hard and hot flesh, she retreated. Her fear did nothing to reduce his lust for her buxom, nubile and vulnerable form. The color of his eyes was no longer black. They were the color of lust. Oh Satoshi, please be gentle with me. She pleaded with him to be gentle with her. He ignored her pleadings and reached for her chest to roughly take what was his, a handful of. Kakashi Hatake sighed and put down his copy of Ika Ika Paradise. Stupid sensei didn't even let him read porn in peace. Inside the office of Hokage, Minato Namikaze never screamed. Obviously, how could he? He was the fastest and the deadliest ninja of Konoha, marrying the most dangerous and volatile women on the ground under sky, surviving her when she was being visited by Aunt Flo, and all the while never forgetting their anniversary. He was most definitely the manliest man amongst men. And men do not scream. So it was to great surprise of everyone in the room that Minato Namikaze screamed like a 2-year-old girl. Even Kushina was surprised, but her determination was enough to see her through her plan. Barely. To be frank, the reason for Minato's scream was totally justified. Would you scream if a crazy and bloodthirsty woman had nailed a 5-feet-long katana, an inch below your crotch? Thought so. Minato would probably be more horrified as he realized that what seemed like an exceptional bullseye hot was actually Kushina having missed her target. Explain, Kushina demanded. Now, she emphasized her action by wiggling her sword a little, causing the manliest man amongst men to squeak. You know, in awkward situation, the human mind has a tendency to go into the unlikeliest of the place. So it wasn't a wonder that despite being in a delicate situation, Minato realized something. The situatio gave a new meaning to having someone by the balls. Somewhere under Fidelius' charm, the boy who had caused so much mayhem by just the virtue of his existence was currently tinkering with a radio. Tinkering would suggest that he was doing some highly mechanical shit that he should know nothing about, but it sounded more educated than saying he was changing the batteries. Technology in the elemental nations was a very intriguing concept. All of the elemental culture had started barely 600 years ago, yet they had some very high level of technology like light bulbs, while they didn't even have a grain of grain powders. It was a very peculiar concept. While light bulbs seem today almost basics, one should remember that the civilization was well over 1800 years ago as compared to the current civilization, which had seemingly started with the appearance of the mystical Sage of Six Paths. His memorization of Konoha's library had yielded the knowledge that it was due to traces of an extant court civilization being found, and there was little information to be found except very sturdy things like the occasional light bulb, wires containing glass that was supposedly used to transfer light, res to conduct electricity made of silver, and so on. However, a majority of it was unusable and had been sold in junk after a lot of useless experimentation in it. Naruto, for his part, had purchased all the junk that he deemed as repairable under the Reparo charm and the Reparo Electris for the electrical equipments. With being in orphanage, Naruto knew that his essentials were covered. He ended up purchasing almost everything. And as a result, a mountain of junk was sitting under his Fidelius-covered roof. It wasn't much that he managed to construct with Mokuden and magic. Just some pillars with a solid roof of thin metal sheet over it. The sheet was charmed to be unbendable, unbreakable, and stuck to pillars with sticking charms. It was a makeshift arrangement, but the area under it was humongous in Naruto's opinion. Unfortunately, the junk, despite being literally trash, was worth something and had caused Naruto's fortune to be used up to a quarter. And the rest would be used up if his calculations were correct. He needed even more money, somehow. The point was that only he could repair them, since as limited his knowledge of Muggles was, Voldemort's knowledge of Muggle electronics was still centuries ahead of the ninjas. As a result, if he decided to sell any of this technology, he needed to have monopoly over it. Monopoly equals real huge money. He had an idea of making money. Being a doctor. Matter of importance is being a doctor and not a medic ninja. The difference is that a doctor didn't need to know chakra and had an open examination. All you had to do was to give an examination, and you would get a degree and certificate that allowed you to practice medicine. The thing was that doctors were currently less in demand as compared to medic ninja. It was because medicine itself had not progressed much. While sterilization was known, most of the clinical-grade sterilizer had not even been invented yet. There was still no treatment of tuberculosis had been a serious issue even in his time. It rarely fatal with timely treatment. Here it was a death sentence even with Tsunade. Tsunade was cherished as the most talented healer of this era. It was correct, but even she couldn't Diseases like tuberculosis, terminal cancer, organ transplant rejections. Because as awesome chakra may seem, it wasn't unlimited in applications. But now he was here, he could heal them. And make money from the rich people too. Along the way, as far as he knew, the wife of the feudal lord of Fire Country had been diagnosed with tuberculosis and had been given few months to live by Tsunade. He needed to get a hold of newspapers. The situation simply reeked of money. Perhaps a word here of a disinfecting and organ regenerating potion might reach the ears of feudal lords, but who was to say? The audio which had been cleaned and repaired was thrown away when it didn't seem to work despite the electricity generating seals. It was one of those examples, where things don't work on external factors. Like the radio, because there was no signal being broadcasted for it. But he had a way around it. The modifications spell so that a radio worked on the Wizard World network. They wouldn't require any radio signals if his hypothesis was correct. He waved his wand. Wizardess Morpher. Instantly the shape of the radio began to change. A bulb where no had been before came into existence and turned on. Music by Weird Sisters started playing, causing a smile to come manifest itself on his face. The magical waves projected by the broadcasting companies were always there. That's why you could choose to listen to any earlier broadcast whenever you want. This proved that he was still in the same world, just millenniums ahead. He needed to know what happened to this world. Why had it degraded so back? He waved his wand, causing the radio to shift to the last broadcast by it. Hello everyone, this is unfortunately the last broadcasting by Wizarding Network. It's your Minister of Magic Harry Potter. Naruto cursed. Even after death, the Scar Head wouldn't leave him alone. Omake. Kakashi Hatake sighed and put down his copy of Ika Ika Paradise. Stupid sensei didn't even let him read porn in peace. Waiting for any more scream, idly Kakashi wondered whether he should go in or not since he was on the guard duty. Finally, he shrugged it off since anything which would make his sensei scream like that was obviously out of his league. Concluding he had waited enough, Kakashi opened his Ika Ika. He ignored her pleadings and reached for her chest to roughly take what was his, a handful of cliffhanger. Eyes of one Kakashi Hatake twitched. Did the authors even know what their fans felt when this shit happened to them? Fans waited desperately for months if not years for the next part of story to come out, and when they do come out, it was with barely few pages worth of story to its name. And then the bastards give a fucking cliffhanger. It was at that meant the copy-eyed ninja had an epiphany. All authors like this were assholish jerks who first wrote a great story and then probably wanked to the thought of hanging out on their readers. And then everyone thinks that the story is abandoned. They update story with a barely 3K plus chapter. Fuckers. Omake ends. Anger in quantities he hadn't felt in times long forgotten, came over him and threatened to swarm him over. Everything he had strived to save and preserve was gone because he hadn't been strong enough to protect it. They thought he was foolish to kill the Muggles. They thought the horcruxes had driven him insane. The former Dark Lord took a moment to satisfy his heart with the fact that this was probably the damnation that came to the followers of Dumbledore's greater good. So many people wondered why exactly he hoped to destroy the Muggles. The reason it was simple. The Muggles were even more foolish than the wizards, trying to control forces they could barely comprehend. That alone usually wouldn't be worth much, but only he, the greatest wizard of modern time, was smart enough to conclude what Dumbledore was too senile to see. The Muggles were not only fool but also dangerous fools. It was such a simple fact. The squibness in the world was increasing at a massive rate when he had begun his campaign. The light said that it was due to inbreeding amongst purebloods. The dark said that it was due to the infusion of too much blood of the Muggles and Muggleborns. Both were wrong by such margins that the situation would have been hilarious if it wasn't so tragic. The IDIOTS were trying to comprehend a problem so far out of the league, like a first year trying to attempting to create a Fidelius. The light was wrong because while a distasteful thing, incest was very rare even amongst the purebloods. The dark was wrong because the marrying Muggles and Muggleborns did nothing except producing more variation and allowed magic to express more stable traits like metamor. Magism like Nymphadora Tonks and an enlarged magical core like in the case of Dark Lord himself. So it many may question of the century, why exactly did the Dark Lord hate the Muggles? It was simple. Fear. Rationalized fear. The Muggles had capabilities to unknowingly destroy entire magical race without even knowing that there were countries of wizards that they had annihilated in their meaningless grudges. He could give example of the witch hunts, but they were meaningless in modern times. An example would be bombings of London. Even the strongest shielding charms and wards were torn away paper when even the weakest of bombs were dropped near them, shredding innocent wizards and witches underneath it to strips of flesh. But that was but a trailer of the horror movie that was about to follow. The most prominent evidence of his theory was of July 1945 in Japan. Back then there were roughly 75 million Japanese living without magic. At roughly 2 million wizards, the Japanese wizarder empire was easily one of the most influential and powerful wizarding superpower. Everything seemed great for wizarding world of Japan. As of September 1945, there was not even a single wizard left in Japan. If one is not that good with history, a clue should be given. The first place where the wizards had been annihilated was Hiroshima, when the atomic bombings by America had been conducted on August of 1945. Within the first moment of impact, everything within the radii of a few hundred feet of the center explosion had been turned to vapors, with exception of the stronger buildings which had only been burned and partially melted. They only got their windows and doors blasted out and their temperature inside to be raised to few thousand degrees Celsius. But that was just the beginning of horrors. However harmful radiation that followed may seem to Muggles, they were worse to the wizards. Much, much worse. The radiation caused a magically mutated form of cancer. A terminal magical cancer. Cancer, as in short explanation, is a form of body fighting itself. Obviously it is much more complicated in reality that an entire science branch, oncology, has been dedicated to its study. What happens in a majority of cancer is that a cell or a group of cells decide to go crazy with regeneration. This causes a ridiculous amount of cells to be generated with only one goal in mind: generate more cells. These cells don't care that the host body simply doesn't has an unlimited supply of essential nutrition, water and oxygen. So they steal from nearby cells, causing the normal nearby cells to starve. The cancer cells tend to win because of their nature. This property is what kills victims of cancer. Sometimes the cancer cells, thankfully, are limited only to a particular part of body. The problem is, the word, sometimes, is a very fucked up word when something like cancer is concerned. The counterpart is where the cancerous cells decide to travel through blood or other means of body to form tumors, to form in different places. Hard to treat, and you never know when cancer may be just waiting to spout out again to their advantage. The Muggle cancer is not contagious, meaning that, God forbids, anyone you knew suffered from cancer, then it wouldn't stop you from interacting with them in fear that you would also catch cancer like one catches common cold. Suppose two people are interacting. One is a victim of cancer and other is normal. Soon, the other also develops cancer. It is coincidence, nothing else. Here is the problem why magic isn't as awesome when it comes to cancer. Magical cancer is heavily contagious and it spreads faster than common cold. It is so fast acting that 1 second you are having one tumor and the other second, your body is full of it. Additionally, it is as fatal as rabies, it kills you. No exception or treatment. However, unlike rabies, which takes a while to properly manifest upon someone coming in contact with someone with the disease, magical cancer kills within a day or two at most. Magic accelerates cancer to an unfathomable level. Magic of a wizard tries to heal body, nourishing the cancer cells and normal cells alike, rapidly increasing their regeneration. Magic tries to restore cancer cells to normal cells, but by the time it restores one cell, hundreds of other cancerous cells have been formed, feeding on magic to sustain themselves. Wizards naturally don't suffer from cancer because magic prevents any genetic abnormality that may cause a person to suffer from cancer. Unfortunately, the radiations from atom bombs is too strong, as compared to the meager protection magic provides. 2 million wizards killed in 2 months. But it isn't even the worst of it. Japan was far from the only country which lost its Asian wizards. China, which had the highest wizardry population in world, was wizardless by 1950. Europe was somehow secluded, as was America, but by the time some control over the disease could be implemented, most of wizarding population had been annihilated. Pixies, Unicorns and centaurs which were once a common sight were now restricted to forests of Hogwarts. Goblins which had fearsome armies of thousands were now barely a handful. Restricted to banks. Oh, the sheer blasphemy of it all. Phoenix. The heralds of the light that used to flock freely in skies unlimited were extinct. Fox was the last known phoenix and he was probably dead too. It's bonded no longer capable of sustaining the creature in this realm. Death comes to all. It just gets delayed sometimes. That last thought caused Tom Riddle to pause. Why did he sound so wise? His obsession with immortality seems to have faded away. While the anger was there at Harry Potter having doomed his beloved magical world, the anger no longer was overwhelming him. Perhaps the horcruxes did affect his mental stability. And when did he thought of himself as Tom Riddle and not Voldemort? Leaving the thought for later experimentation, Tom Riddle resumed his earlier ponderings. Every single Asian, African and even polar wizarding culture was extinct. American wizards. They didn't even have enough people to form a government anymore. The massive International Confederation of Wizards was the biggest and most powerful of the wizarding organization, was now barely constituted by Europe. And even Europe was dying. In Voldemort's opinion, magic had been weakening for a long time. It had started because there was a limited amount of magic on Earth and too many wielders, but nothing too problematic. This had started the whole anti-Muggleborns and anti-Mug Glay movement due to a myriad of factor-like previous history of witch hunting and stupid people getting in power. Nothing as problematic as the weapons of mass destructions. The humongous radiation and energy released by the bombs had crushed most of the Earth's magical core. The magical entity that released the ambient magic. The magical core of a wizard absorbed this ambient magic to store magic and release when called upon. But now there wasn't enough ambient magic to cause any powerful core to recharge itself. As a result, magical cores shrunk due to disuse and made wizards weaker. No longer could the ancient magics be called forth. No longer tales of men who could change weather with a twitch of fingers was sung. Wands, the pure sacrilege of magic, were made compulsory. Training wheels, the wands had been once upon a time, were now the only way to access the somewhat heavier magic now. Most of Hogwarts was empty because there were no children to fill the school with anymore. When a young Tom Riddle had seen the facts, he had formed the hypothesis and published it in his book, only for his book to be sidelined as mutterings of a deluded child. The light thought that it was anti-Muggle and the dark thought he was a half-blood. So, to protect the primordial force that had rescued him from his orphanage, he had delved further into the dark arts. The horcruxes, unfortunately, had already twisted him into something out of a horror movie, and it was only probably due to his soul mixing with Naruto's that he had any semblance of sanity anymore. Still, Voldemort had been nearly successful at what he had aimed at. Bringing Muggle worlds to its knees so that any research into nuclear physics could be stopped. It was funny really, he had initially been the villain. Delving into dark arts, just because he had a lust for power. Splitting the soul itself. And then he had been the hero who endured all the darkness for the greater good. But there was no longer any beautiful heroine waiting for him at end. No sidekick he could rely upon. He didn't even have his fucking happy ending. While he had lost his sanity, Tom Riddle had lost none of its brilliance. He had already foreseen the possible results of mixing wizards and technology. All it took was one of the idiots to delve into forbidden section of radiation and unleash the magical cancer once more. And he had been right. Somewhat. Somewhere along the lines in the years of 2022, the divorcee Hermione Granger had finally completed the technology the research of which had so many problems. It had caused her divorce with one Ron Weasley. Voldemort couldn't frankly give a shit about one young girl having realized that marriage isn't all that easy up as it seems. Though he was somewhat intrigued about the section with love potion, but it was for later time. What he was interested in was the technology that the Muggleborns had completed. The Transformo-Calculus Morphus spell. Allegedly, it would transform any wizarding radio into something called a laptop. After that there seemed to be a gap of close to 140 years when the wizarding radio had been opened again. After 140 years there was only broadcast by the cursed Potter saying something about being sorry and for failing them. In his previous life, Voldemort would have been elated to hearing the words. But now it filled him with dread. What exactly had the wand fucker done to his world? Having no idea of what to do, he started hearing broadcasts from the 2nd of May 1998, the day of his downfall. In one sitting, he had listened to 10 minutes of radio of headlines. From the 2nd of May to 8th of May, hearing with a grimace how little resistance the rest of his forces had provided. From then he heard headlines from monthly updates. They were not as detailed as he would have liked, but they were all he could listen to lest he waste time to listening to useless details. Using the auto-tuning spell, he had stuck gold when he came acr. Os the achievement of the decade program. When he heard the information about Potter, he couldn't believe his ears, so he replayed the transmission. It was with horror he realized that Potter was an idiot. He, the greatest sorcerer of era, had lost against an idiot. A top-notch fucker of the worst category out there. What kind of man names his own son Albus Severus Potter? Even Voldemort wasn't that cruel to a kid. Killing an infant, no problem. But giving him such a stupid name. He would surprise if the kid's peers didn't verbally molest the child over such an idiotic name. Most importantly, that kind of man takes positions like Minister of Magic and Chief Warlock and does nothing. As HEC report, Voldemort facepalmed. He was good at reading between the lines. The bottom fell out of the market. Hyperinflation was causing mayhem and Potter could do nothing. And most wizards had stuffed their heads into their own asses. That's what you get for making an idiot a Minister of Magic. And then, the magical core of Earth started healing by natural process, causing people to credit him for defeating the problem of squibness. And if that much idiocy wasn't enough, the moron connected the internet with that of muggles. Most people who were regular savvy of internet wouldn't understand the problem, let alone someone like Voldemort, who should by all account, know nothing about internet concide. Ring the fact that he lived in an internet-less world and had died in 1998, before the advent of the proper commercial connectivity. 1 week earlier, he had gotten nowhere and decided to use the spell. Devised by Granger in an isolated room. Such was his mastery of magic that he blew up only one radio in process of creating a computer. He had managed to reverse transfigure the half radio and half cat anyways. The manual that flashed on the sleek laptop guided him through a process of intricate instructions that took him 2 days to get a hang of despite his photographic memory. Confident that he had learned enough for now, he connected to the magical Wi-Fi. In the entire process, Voldemort was unaware to one crucial lay of technology. You can't connect to any type of Wi-Fi without a Wi-Fi network. And in this era, what would provide the Wi-Fi network? The fucking Hokage Mountain. The answer of it lies in the working of wizardry radio and why exactly only a wizardry radio could be transformed into a laptop. The wizardry radio station broadcasted wavelengths of magical. In reality was an incorrect term, since the wizardry radio, while seemed like it worked on radio, it didn't. It instead worked on magical aspect of light. Actual radios worked on radio waves. The magical light that was used in magical radios didn't travel straight. Instead it kept on circling around Earth, from where could be picked by anyone. The size of the waves was theoretically speaking, 0. Hence infinite data amount can be stored even in the smallest of space. This is where the magical Wi-Fi came from. The laptop connected this source of information. What Granger had done was incredibly genius and incredible stupid. She had taken a magically charmed computer with an internet which sent the entire Uggle internet to the broadcasting waves. It was genius because it worked. It was stupid because all the information meant all the information. If Voldemort wanted to access anyone's bank account, all he needed to do was an Alamora and bam, he had an access to someone's files. It was evident by the fact that currently he was using account of some American general to access what had been confidential military files. The fact the wizard had no protection against such problems roared of incompetence. The magical internet had some more sites than the conventional internet and was actually protected against common locking spells. That lasted till Voldemort used an obscure spell and he was accessing some heavy dark arts that were clearly illegal. Why exactly this information was doing on internet anyways? The frustration reached the upper limit when Voldemort came across detailed descriptions of horcruxes and how to make them. Amazingly, it managed to relieve Tom of his anger. Anger was wasted on some guys. The realization leaving a tired Tom Riddle in its wake. It took the rest of week on internet as Voldemort researched heavily on what had happened, finding all the information he had so far. That's when he came across the files of Buckingham Palace and he hacked into the account of the military general in charge of reporting to the royal family of England. Project Cancer. Some squib had sent an email to a muggle which had been intercepted by a hacker who had used it to somehow access the magical internet and sent it to the police. The police had passed it on till it reached the hands of muggle equivalent of Department of Mysteries. A while later, some information about Imperio had gotten out and terrified the muggles had nuked Hogwarts, Beauxbatons, Durmstrang and the American Lincoln University. This caused a war to spark off in America between America and England, which soon devolved in World War, and a new type of biological bomb was used that went out of control and killed most of humanity and sent it the technology century back. Worst of it all, even after all this, Potter survived. And while he was taking his last breath, he broadcasted on Wizarding Radio and Internet his last apology. The silence was all that was left as the laptop denoted a loss of further data retrieval from the radio. Not even static came. The silence was soon broken when a giggle left lips of one broken Dark Lord. The giggle continued repeatedly, starting slow, infrequent and blank at first. Soon the giggle became louder and frequent and finally devolved into laughter. The increase in intensity continued as the man continued to laugh hysterically. A drop of tear came down from his right eye. Then one from his left eye. The next tear drops came in synchronization. Then another set of tear drops continued before a steady stream of tears came down the eyes of one Tom Riddle. The finality and worth of what he lost crashing down upon him. Naruto Namikaze during the whole proceedings curiously said nothing. But then again, what could he? Bored. Disappointed. More bored. More disappointed. So fucking bored. So fucking disappointed. With a minor flick of his hands Naruto swatted away the hairs obscuring his views of the proceedings in the council chamber and focused magic in his eyes. The mage sight flared into life, spinning lazy and analyzing. Chakra seemed to be almost everywhere in the chambers. From cores of the clan heads to the chakra of nature, and even the walls seemed to shimmer and glimmer with seals of profound powers. Aren't you a little too young for being a civilian counselor? It took a load of occlumency and an overload of sheer willpower to not flinch in surprise. Consequences of having a lifetime of being ambushed in places which killed every single one of your ally but you. Slowly, so as to not startle the ninja, for the thought of a civilian being capable of sneaking upon him was simply deplorable. Naruto turned to face the man who had hid his presence from him so well. Elder Danzo, greetings of good morning, Naruto greeted politely. Not much of a good morning, I am afraid, my boy. It was a little surprised that Danzo would be skilled at polite conversation. As the commander of Anbu Black Ops and Anbu Root, rumored, for over 5 decades, Danzo was a master of making conversations and killing people with words alone. Knives may make you bleed but words may burn the world. Considering the fact that it was you who invited me to the council, it is I who should be asking you the question, shouldn't I? It was a testament to Danzo's skill, perhaps apathy, that Danzo didn't even bother raising an eyebrow at the statement. It was a bit of open secret that Danzo enjoyed loyalty of a great faction of Junins, Chunin and most of Anbu. Danzo was a guy that even the Hokage treaded around carefully, hence it was probably child's play for him to request an invitation being sent Naruto's way. The civilian guild head Masaki Higurashi was smart woman, wife to the preeminent blacksmith of Konoha, and when Danzo had approached her, despite the fact that it would displease most of the civilian council, she had been forced to send the invite Naruto. Danzo was part of the ultra-elite group that you just didn't say no to. Not without utter loss of economic, social and political status. Danzo was special in the matter since he didn't have to do anything to civilians who displeased him. Despite having actually done nothing to civilians of Konoha in his long career, civilians feared him to the point that the mere thought associating with someone having brought his ire was enough for the person inly alienated. Amazing the fact was that fear was simply so effective. Being feared what you might do despite having done nothing in the past. Ah, that I did, but don't you think it's a delicate matter to be accepting your invitation? Danzo acknowledged. Naruto didn't bother replying, merely inclining his head at the approaching ninja. Naruto tensed a little, knowing without looking that Danzo was tensed as well. This was one of the handful of ninjas in world who had drawn Danzo's ire decades ago yet was still breathing. Another person on the not to be fucked with list. Ah, It seems that the Council of Civilians chose to induct you as them Naruto-kun, the legendary ninja said to him kindly. There is much wisdom to be found in Konoha, Sandaime-sama. Naruto sketched a bow at the veteran after saying the words cryptically. A glint of humor ignited itself in the man's eyes as the words were decrypted mentally. Naruto had deflected the questions, praising some elements of Konoha while simultaneously implying that the civilian council lacked wisdom. As diplomatic as they come. Still agreeing with my friend, isn't it a topic too delicate? Sandaime questioned good-naturedly. As far as my opinion is concerned, I think it's more of a foolish charade than anything else. Naruto replied casually. The Sandaime merely said an intrigued eyebrow while Danzo continued to look on with his stoic expression. Further talks ceased for a moment as the foreign diplomat bellowed. When the diplomat of Konohagakure no Sato came to our village, it was I councilman and councilwoman that was the first to be suspicious of the so-called peace treaty. And how shameful it is that I was right to be so. Alas, if only our peace-seeking and merciful Hokage wasn't such an avatar of peace itself. Needless to say, the diplomat was laying it on thick. Not that it matters much with so much of it already being an already a foregone conclusion. Naruto commented out aloud. Danzo merely hummed in agreement while the Sandaime looked on the civilian drama. It was less of a diplomatic negotiation and more of a formality for purpose of appearance. It was the first time after the Third Shinobi World War, Kumo had bothered to respond to the Konoha's peace treaty formalization. Having sent its head ninja to Konoha to sign a peace treaty, which in reality was a cover for an attempt to acquire the Byakugan by kidnapping the clan heiress Hinata Hyuga. However, when the head ninja was killed by Hiashi Hyuga in the attempt last night, Kumo is still trying to obtain the Byakugan by threatening war unless Hiashi's body was turned over to make up for the head ninja's death. In what is now being called the Hyuga affair, Hiashi's body is to be given to Kumo instead. His Byakugan intact. However, the inner players know the truth. The Hyuga clan elders had decided that Hiashi's twin was to be given to Kumo instead, his Byakugan sealed. Still, there would be major loss to Konoha losing part of its face. Hyuga losing its only prominent Anbu captain, and Kumo-Konoha relations are going to be worse than ever. The Sandaime grimly nodded, with Danzo being now the one with an intrigued expression spoke. It is a matter of no profound nature. Danzo began, pausing and affirming that he had the attention of his two accomplices before continuing. But attending this meeting doesn't seem to fit your logical progression. Naruto raised an eyebrow, acknowledging the statement. And just what is my logical progression, Lord Danzo? Right to his wording was the amused tone in which the words were spoken. Danzo's lips almost twitched in humor. Why but anything in accordance with your agenda. This threw Naruto for a loop. The Sandaime was seemingly in the same boat as him as he too looked surprised. My agenda? Naruto questioned. Your village leader has trained you well. Spying capability at your age is rather. The words xt to be spoken were stopped as brief but heavy killer intent flashed along the Sandaime's eyes. Before the enraged veteran could say anything, Naruto spoke. That is an interesting spy detection method you have there. Naruto spoke simply. Oh, for an Anbu program anyways. Naruto mused before continuing. As for your query, no Danzo-sama, I am not spy. My life is complicated enough as it is. The Sandaime looked to be in control once more interjected. While it is nice to hear, I hope you realize that it doesn't absolve you of all suspicions for a reason. Though it may be hard to explain that to Kushina without being castrated. Danzo said even as he grimaced. Naruto stifled an amused snort. Professionalism. I am but a simple merchant, elders. Procurer of services that no one provides. As all the worth of Konoha is concentrated here, I am doing nothing but advertisement. Naruto stated. And just what are the services that are being offered? Danzo inquired as the Sandaime looked on, intrigued. For the first time since either of them had seen him, Naruto smiled. Why but the Kumo Anbu commander committing seppuku. The noble beast of lightning. Sandaime exclaimed as a moan. NT of silence was taken to digest the information. Danzo was quicker on uptake as he added on. What will be the price of the assassination? Danzo inquired, not unlike how housewives inquired about prices of onion. Before Naruto could quote the price, Sandaime interrupted. Asking a child of assassination of AS rank shinobi, have you truly left of all the senses Danzo? Sandaime asked furious. Seeing Danzo about to retort, Naruto decided that enough was enough and it was time to move on to the main event. Prologue was stretching too far. And who said anything about assassination? Naruto started to explain his plan, even as the eyebrows of both the elder kept rising till it disappeared in the hairline. Makoto Kotomine was on a roll. Of course even she knew that what she was doing was orally wrong, but a decade in shinobi politics was more than enough to strip even a rookie of her morality, and Makoto was a veteran. So even as she weaved lies and seeded half-truths, she knew nobody would dare interrupt. "Would you stop your irritating monologue crap?" A high-pitched voice in the back made itself known. "What?" Kuro turned to look at who would dare interrupt her, even as the crowd parted to allow the council focus on the speaker. There, in midst of Sandaime and Danzo, stood a runt. She made eye contact with him, unknowingly sealing her fate as her mind was now his to read. A fucking runt. Oh, anybody who was somebody knew who the boy was. The bastard child of Minato Namikaze, though who exactly the mother was of question. And considering how snake-like and feminine one of the Sannin was. Makoto stopped herself. She shouldn't have read Kushina Uzumaki's Ika Ika, Yellow Snake trilogy. Curse her yaoi addiction. Pardon. Makoto forced herself to act politely. Surely the boy wouldn't be so impolite so as to. "You are not pardoned, you stupid blint." And there goes the bloody politeness down the drain. Makoto felt more than saw the shock resounding in the council. Why, she ought to bend and spank the rude bastard straight. Blah blah, blah blah. Is there any end to your pointlessly stupid shit-spewing crap? Not that it mattered now. She ought to murder the blonda. How dare you? How dare I? The question is, how dare you commit the atrocity you did? That stopped her in the track as well as the council. Taking a moment to collect herself, Makoto spoke. "And pray tell, child, just what did I do?" Ordering the assassination of Hyuga clan head in middle of Treaty of Peace sounds a lot like atrocity. And then there was a moment of silence before everything was chaos. Naruto watched with bated breath as lots of meaningless words were spoken, shouted, and altogether forgotten in the midst of chaos. But it is in the midst of this chaos that Lord Voldemort truly excelled. With wide eyes, Makoto was looking at him, her mind wide open to his legitimacy, first due to her rage and then shock. "Empty words," Makoto whispered as few people stopped to listen to her. "Empty words, I say." Meanie ed at top of her lungs as order was finally restored. Knowing the momentum was his, Naruto threw a scroll, conjured a moment before, in middle of chaos with aid of memory he drew from her mind. "If my words are empty, then pray tell the council why Anbu orders for assassination signed by the Hokage lies before me. Even if the trap was near perfect, Naru." To knew that Makoto was too much a consummate professional to be more than momentarily stunned. "Konoha infiltrated Kumo Anbu," Makoto said after checking the scroll to what seemed to be genuine article. She knew the Hokage's seal by heart. Bit of prophylactic measure considering that it was justified by you just now indirectly confirming that the orders are genuine. Oh God, the horror WNED upon Motoko of what she had done by indirectly admitting that Hokage had ordered an assassination during the treaty formalization. And as she looked back at the runt, that fucker, all she could see was his back where a green snake looked at her with silver eyes before Danzo Shimura stepped forward. She remained stunned through rest of negotiations that Konoha had all but won when she had blundered. Earth clone, really? Can't even bother sending a shadow clone, Orochimaru? Danzo asked the snake Sannin. It was a damp setup, thought Orochimaru idly. It was making his skin itchy as the body transfer had been recent. Still nothing compared to his disaster in Land of Rain against Hanzo. That place had been wet and he didn't mean it in the way his horny teammate would have meant. Out a shadow clone would have made that much difference at all. Orochimaru remarked. Not against the likes of you. Danzo took a moment to mull over the remark. The likes of me? Danzo questioned. That sounds like an accusation from one of the worst traitors in history of Konoha. Danzo rebuked. Cut the crap, Danzo. Orochimaru said, showing first signs of being irritated. You murder an Re-clan, but I can barely experiment on few prisoners. Why the sheer hypocrisy of it all? Danzo had to admit that Orochimaru had a point. I presume that your interaction with Akatsuki gave you details about the Uchiha massacre. Orochimaru didn't reply to that. Silence was as good as affirmation. Get to the point, why are you here? And who are the cohorts with you? They are the Sound 5, the most elite division under Orochimaru-sama. And I presume you are Yakushi Kabuto. Kabuto stiffened as despite being masked, Danzo had somehow recognized him. Luckily Orochimaru rescued him. To answer your question Danzo, I am here to offer you a most interesting proposition. And what would you demand in return? Orochimaru raised an eyebrow, not even going to hear the proposition. It is a meaningless option if the price is simply too high to pay. Danzo said simply, oh, I assure you, the price will be very cheap. I will implant the Uchiha's Sharingan into you with Shodai's wood release to supplement vitally. All of that for the price of one boy. Danzo didn't have to think about that. No, Orochimaru questioned, not really expecting. No, nada, never. Danzo speaking as if talking to a particularly dim-witted 3-year-old. May I ask you to elaborate on them? You may ask. Danzo gave permission, causing Orochimaru to roll his eyes. Tsunade was particularly fond of that crap. Why wouldn't you trade the Slytherin boy? That is because I still have one eye, Orochimaru. Danzo replied before continuing, I can see just how the boy pulled off the trick with the Kumo ambassador. He is in possession of the most powerful mind-reading ability in the world, with no contact and no apparent latency. Undetectable by chakra and completely silent, too dangerous to be given to the likes of you. Danzo spoke. But you already know that, don't you? Orochimaru merely grinned and exploded into a mud pile as the Sound 5 and Kabuto attacked Danzo. Danzo merely sighed. Danzo POV. It was the Kagaya who lead the attack. As they fell into a practiced formation, I couldn't help but be disappointed. The formation was a Konoha Chunin 1, a standard one at that. The disappointment being that it gave away a lot about the team itself. At its point, the Kagaya was a strong Taijutsu user. With the second position, the orange-haired Jirobo was a supplementary Taijutsu user. With the healer Kabuto as center for protection and healing. Behind Kabuto were the twin-headed Sakin and Ukin, who were ambiguous about ability, but I had lived long enough to know about their ability. Long-range fire style it was to deal with them. At the penultimate position was the redhead weaving a genjutsu, with the spider-like man Kidomaru. Weaving hand symbols, probably a high-accuracy long-range technique. Rookies. I inhaled air and exhaled hurricanes. Wind style. Dancing hurricanes. AB rank ninjutsu, which the Kagaya tanked along with Jirobo, but the attack was merely supplementary A. The air was now saturated with wind style chakra. Fire style. Great Dragon's Maw. And that prick Sarutobi calling himself a professor. That bastard couldn't even do most techniques silently. The fire dragon collided with the Sound 5 and exploded into a massive inferno with explosive force, causing a glaring opening to open in their formation. I didn't really have time to play around. At the mom, Orochimaru was probably approaching the Slytherin boy. I had to hurry up. Body flicker technique. My sword withdrawn, I appeared behind the Kagaya as his bloodline was clearly the most dangerous. I couldn't in good conscience allow him to trigger it. Sensing me, the Kagaya flooded his back with chakra, growing massive bony plates, nearly impenetrable to everything. Nearly being the key word. ND-infused steel impaled his brain straight through the base of his skull. He dropped like a puppet. Alas, I couldn't retrieve the sword as Kabuto had a chakra scalpel swinging at my head at the moment. I must remember to retrieve the sword later. I replaced myself with the Tayuya girl. I would have preferred to replace myself with the spider boy, but his chakra resistance would have been much higher. Kabuto was fast enough to prevent accidentally impaling the girl, but unfortunately she wasn't fast enough to dodge my next attack. Wind style. Vacuum bullets. Straight though her head, it was instant kill. Chakra-infused air still in my lungs, I launched a barrage at Kabuto and Jirobo. Jirobo tanked them with his skin, but Kabuto took the shot through his right eye. Kuchio's no jutsu. The first jutsu from the opposite side. I would have preferred silent one. I found the voice of my opponent to be irritating. A spider, what did I really expected? My distraction would cost me as seals of Signif. I can't strength manifested around the last two of the Sound 5. Kabuto was nothing more than a dead again corpse. Dead corpse reanimation, a jutsu made by his sensei, the Nadaime Hokage. Foiled again. As the massive spider began spewing a horde of spiders, with the summoner preparing a golden arrow of some kind and Jirobo rushed in my direction, I merely took a breath. It was a good day to be alive. Making a half seal of tiger. Chakra roared in old coils of mine. S rank it is. Fire style. Great fire annihilation. Earth style. Disembodied earth. Dual casting, the capacity to fire off two justice in tandem. Admittedly, I was blatantly ripping off Sarutobi, but all is fair in love and war. The ground moved as if stuck with a particularly strong earthquake, causing even the particularly stable I'd leg insects to tremble as Uchiha Madara's iconic fire technique to fry the spiders and engulfing their summoner in an incredibly hot inferno. Jirobo was just upon me. At this range, I couldn't dodge. I raised my hand to catch his punch. He must think of me as a fool. I too would admit my foolishness in catching a punch from a vastly stronger opponent, but I took a moment to disagree. Gate of opening. Open. Gate of rest. Open. I wasn't like Guy, but I could open two gates just fine. Chakra flooded my body, giving me euphoric feeling. Jirobo's look as I stopped his fist was particularly satisfying. Years before, the damage from the gates became particularly taxing. It was more than enough for a ninja, an eternity for me. I crushed his knuckles under my fist. Jirobo's eyes closed from pain. His low pain tolerance costed him as I buried my index finger in his right eye, knuckle deep. Taking a moment to clean up my fingers, I looked to see my root Anbu just arriving. Let's hope that we aren't as late in reaching the Slytherin boy. It was a good day to be alive. Naruto POV. My instincts flared into full power as a powerful anti-apparition ward came into existence around me. Instincts from THE war came rushing back as I didn't even question the presence of anti-apparition ward in this world. I rolled from my place to a particularly sheltered corner, covering my back. Snipers were the worst, I cursed in my mind as I pointed my wand at the ground and casted a Homeonum Reveolium. The answer floored him. The closest presence was still a while away. Magic flooded his eyes, activating Mage eyes. With new perception came new perspective and new understanding. Close, yet so far, a ward of chakra but an anti-teleporting seal all the same. Distance across the fields, he saw a snake and it was looking back at him. He knew of the man named Orochimaru by his title, and boy did the title do him justice. Naruto wasn't dumb enough to miss his mother's trashy gay novel and could see why many people saw credence to Orochimaru being his true mother. And wasn't that fucked up? He had a moment before the sage reached him, apparition cancelled by the ward to escape but not chakra. Body flicker. Kra flooded his body and he rushed to his storage. Idly, he felt the snake Sanin rushing him in a burst of chakra much greater than his own, likely thinking he was trying to escape. As if escape was an option, now. Being much closer, he reached the potion storage with moments to spare. It was enough. Accio. He casted, pointing at his expanded leather pouch. A silent cushioning charm and dozens of high-grade potions rushed into his pouch, with exception to one. It was a vial of few drops but was inarguably the most expensive of them all and would probably be the most fundamental of them all. S lips touched the Felix Felicis just as the snake sage came barreling through the door. Some people had no finesse at all. In a heartbeat, I charged. I would have liked to mock Orochimaru, but I was not in a mood to negotiate, and his dramatic entry led me to conclude that he wasn't either. Still, I had an upper hand in terms of familiarity to surrounding, the first attack and most importantly, the liquid luck running in my veins. For next few hours, Lady Luck was tipping my side of balance. Also, Orochimaru had no idea about my other magics. I could read nothing from Orochimaru's eyes, probably a mental barrier, so I had more or less an idea of why he was here. And I knew just how valuable my legitimacy was. Unfortunately for Orochimaru, I was in no mood to share. Unfortunately for me, Orochimaru was a world-renowned ninja and was very determined to get my ability. It would be better to go for an all-or-none approach till I found an opening in the anti-teleportation seal and apparated away. I pointed my wand and roared, Accio. The summoning charm was greatly amplified with the excess magic I funneled through 15 inches of elder wood. Obviously the attack took him off guard, but my window of opportunity closed as soon as it opened, as the ninja managed to palm his hands together while flying towards me. Wind style. Great breakthrough. The force of my summoning just gave a boost to Orochimaru's attack. I would have called it clever if attack wasn't about to make a pancake out of me. Unfortunately for me, Protega Maximus, tightening the shield as much as I could, I withdrew another wand from my pouch. Dual casting was far from my choice in matter, but I needed the flexibility. I cast it even as the Crimson Shield took the brunt of Orochimaru's assault. Depulso. I was casting Ba. I see spells at amplified levels as it was easier to redirect them. It proved worthy as my banishment charm accelerated my shield into the Snake Sage with the force of a battering ram. Having regained his footing, the Elder Ninja merely sidestepped the attack. Not on my clock, motherfucker. Transfiguro. Post-spell transfiguration, if that didn't give me the fucking charm mastery. The idea of transfiguring a spell itself. After it was fired, McGonagall had called the very idea impossible. She was almost correct, but almost correct meant the difference between impossible and the Snake Sage being SP. Lit into two as the shield lost its spherical shape and became a serrated blade-like construct that retained its speed. I could read the surprise on Orochimaru's face before the sudden eruption of grin on his face made my heart plummet. Snakes erupted from his torso and legs and pulled him back into one piece. Now this was just unfair. Mage eyes spun in my eyes eerily like the Sharingan as I saw Orochimaru replace himself with Earth clone within a split second. 1 second, he was here and then just gone. How humiliating to a Dark Lord. This insult couldn't be allowed to stand. Incendio Maximus. Spell amplification was a bit over the top at this level, but I knew just how much danger I was in. I had just lost the sight of my enemy and I had little mobility to relocate in a timely manner. Fire spell provided enough base material while I used a wandless semi-transfiguration spell to shape the fire wall into a bubble of fire encasing me and expanding outward. Basic spells were the key to allowing multiple levels of casting as I fired a Homo Reveolium. He was beneath me and ascending rapidly. It was problematic, I realized as snakes the size of a bus erupted around me. It was enough foreplay, shit just got real. Memories came from my years in Berlin and what little German I had bothered learning before just perfecting my translation spell. Hans. Get the flamethrower. Fiendfire. Pillars of fire had set the world alight. Orochimaru POV. I think this was the biggest problem with the genius system. Perhaps it was the result of being called one all my life, but I don't know why. I didn't even bother questioning the strangely competent young ninja in front of me. His battle awareness was strangely developed. I didn't have time to think further as the constructs of white-hot fire rushed at me en masse. Snakes were out as they had little protection against fire, and I didn't want to explain more than necessary deaths to Manda regarding his clan members. Water justice came to my mind before I chose one and began forming one-handed seals in my right hand even as I run through the lists of Earth-style justice. I began running through another hand seal set in the left hand. Water style. Hydro vortex. My suspicions ran true as the fire constructs simply evaporated my water cyclone and stayed strong. The seals in my left hand completed. Summoning jutsu. Rashomon encasement. An amplified non-living summoning. Massive gates of demonic inscriptions arose and encased the boy in a box in 10-foot thick steel. The temperature only seemed to rise. Foolish boy. Trapped inside the oversized oven-like construct. His body would give away before the steel did. One of the 10 feet thick steel wall melted. As the wall melted away, our slitted eyes met. He was looking straight at me. And while he looked like 16 years old, there was a killer of hundreds that stared back at me who had already made peace with my blood on his hands. What looked like a wooden stick pointed at me began to glow with unholy light. Even as all the fire and heat from surroundings seemed to be sucked into the tip of the weapon. I had been around enough tailed beasts to have an inkling of an idea of what was about to happen. The boy was gathering all the energy in surrounding and going to fire at me in a pillar of concentrated fire. Tough enough to melt straight through the 10 feet of steel of the Rashomon that I had summoned. I bit my thumb and the boy seemed to take a deep breath. The world seemed to stand still. I jumped back and the boy fired. My hand made contently summoning the gate of demonic protection. Molten steel exploded on my face as the pillar of fire took out the Rashomon in the fires of undying light. It was time to pull out the big guns. Naruto could feel the magic burning through his chakra coils. Despite having the body of what seemed like a 16 years, the strain of magic was too damn high simply to be maintained for extended period. And that was a limitation that seemingly didn't apply to his enemy. In a grotesque mockery of life, white snakes erupted from the body of his enemy. Naruto gathered all the hatred he could, causing humongous killing intent to flatten the area near him. Initially Naruto had tried to stall, but he was simply too far away from Konoha to get reinforcement in time. It looks like it was back to old spells. My, what a powerful killing intent from a fucking brat. A sound of mocking nature sounded in his ears. Naruto fired a crucio in the general direction of the voice. He would have preferred a killing curse, but he didn't have that much gas left in his tank. The silvered man smoothly shifted and dodged the curse before standing lankily and staring at Naruto with empty purple eyes. The red clouds on his black cloak simply hung hauntingly in the atmosphere. Orochimaru POV. This is not good, I stated, once my body finished reforming. For you, no, it isn't. For me, it is amazing. Your bounty is high, Kakuzu stated even, as humongous bundles of hair-like threads let themselves loose. The brat's killing intent had attracted far more than leaf trash. The light from the fire attack had probably been like a beacon, while He killing intent was like a bloody lighthouse. Are you after the brat as well, Kakuzu? I asked as I tried to take a breather. The fight with Naruto had admittedly taken a toll on my reserves. He is a target of interest. You are merely of higher priority now. Fuck, Kakuzu had probably been after Naruto. Iwa as well as Kumo would pay a great sum of money for the brat. I had merely been unlucky to have gotten on Akatsuki's radar while near the boy. Worse, Kakuzu was teamed with Hidan. Both were immortals, fresh as daisy, and were S-ranked for a reason. And if the balance wasn't skewed enough already, Kakuzu had much more experience than I did due to his inordinately long lifespan. I could tell that Kakuzu knew I was trying to sneak in a breather, but he probably let me had one, so Hat he himself could flood his coils with chakra. His coils started leaking chakra due to being absolutely overwhelmed with chakra. Here he comes. Fire style. Intelligent fire work. Earth style. Trembling foot of giant. Wind style. Assistance of wind god. And this is one of the two reasons why Kakuzu was so hard to fight against. 3 borderline S-rank ninjutsus launched simultaneously. Kakuzu was a sledgehammer hammer-wielding Nara who aimed at the weakest point with the most overwhelming force. The ground hardened beneath me and shook as if hit by earthquake, causing me to lose footing and cutting off any evasive measures. The fire combination with wind hit me like an inferno atop an uncontrolled wind. All this fire wasn't good for my skin and not certainly my reserves as I grew my body from ashes once again. Kakuzu had closed the distance. Empty green eyes bored into my slitted ones as lightning shone in his mouth. A layer of water arose from ground and bound me. It would amplify the oncoming lightning attack as well. Lightning release. Plasma cannon. Water style. Contentment of ocean. And this precisely was the second reason why Kakuzu was dangerous. He swung a hammer that even Black K. Smiths would call excessive and just kept swinging till even the anvil was dust. I closed my eyes as the plasma cannon vaporized my body. Naruto POV. As I watched the freak show that Orochimaru had called Kakuzu, I couldn't help but feel I had gotten semi-lucky. And if this was the result after liquid luck, I doubted that I would have survived this long without Felix Felicis. Hidan was strong BU. He didn't have an iota of sense to his name. He was immortal according to his claims, and ever since Naruto managed to sever his head with a particularly vicious cutting curse, any doubts regarding that had disappeared in a puff of logic. Now the question was what to do. Thankfully the silencing spell stopped the endless stream of profanity that was Hidan. Mage eyes looked at everything at once as they took in sight of Hidan's, Kakuzu's and Orochimaru's unique body structures. 3 immortals and 3 different methods, that would be research subject for decades worth of time to come. But what was interesting was the anti-teleportation seal. Oh, Naruto knew that Orochimaru didn't know about Apparition, as there were giant weaknesses for it to be that type of seal. More probably it was Anyo. Their type of teleportation that had been targeted, and his Apparition had probably been cut off by accident. And Naruto knew of only one technique and one person that Orochimaru could have prepared the seal against for. Minato Namikaze's Flying Thunder God technique. Unfortunately that didn't help him in the slightest. He knew jack shit about Fuinjutsu to break the seal. The killing curse might work. But if he had a shot with that spell the entire problem wouldn't be as big of a headache anyway. The moment he killed one of the fuckers, he would be easy picking for the other due to his overly strained coils. So he tried to find the caster of the seal by tracking the chakra flow in the seal and following it in reverse. Found him. Kakuzu POV. I idly thought, seriously. One of my masks could tell that the silver-haired Orochimaru's lapdog was about to jump me and I wondered just how badly people seemed to underestimate me. I mean seriously, you just saw me kicking your boss around like yes. Today's trash and you wanted to try your hand at me. You're death. So as the boy jumped at me with what looked like chakra scalpel aimed at my head, I took a breath. 10 feet. He was fast and well trained, I had to give that to him. 5 feet. Orochimaru did train his pawns well. His chakra scalpels were as sharp as they get. 0 feet. My hand ripped his heart out before he reached me. Earth style. Diamond skin. But pawns, no matter what they did, never became king. But they were an effective distraction. Mandara no Jin. Orochimaru roared and let loose 1,000 snakes and then 10,000. The snake released more snakes before all the snakes released blades of steel and rushed at me. Impressive. I breathed in and formed a horse seal. This was a jutsu that I had ripped off from the Uchiha Madara himself. I channeled the chakra of all my masks into my fire mask. Madara had been a heck of a monster to use this technique single-handedly. Fire style. Great fire annihilation. Sheets of white inferno blasted the snakes to oblivion. When the world came to be, I saw that Orochimaru had disappeared in aftermath and so had probably the silver-haired assistant. The silver-haired assistant was a freak just like his master. His heart had started regenerating within moments of my ripping his old one out. I highly doubted that he could regenerate his brain however. Time to test it. I body flick, red behind my main target and smashed him with force of a rampaging bull. He didn't even saw me coming. I carefully held back just a little. His couple of ribs cracked and so did his ankle and one his arms as he went flying away, but I doubt he would be moving anytime soon. I wasn't interested in him though. What was interesting though was Hidan. His head severed, it spoke volumes of the will of fire that the Shodai Hokage spoke off. Hidan wasn't an easy opponent by any means. The fact that he was shouting and yet Kakuzu couldn't hear spoken even louder. If only the brat didn't have any bounty on his head. Sorry kid, but a man's got to eat. I absent-mindedly spoke even as I lifted the head of Hidan who shouted, but my ears remained blissfully silent. This will make it easier. I shoved my hand into Hidan's mouth. And his head began to grow black as he ingested Kabuto's blood. It was time to try a theory. I crushed Hidan's inordinate pleasure in doing so. Hidan's head began to regenerate from his body. A wound transference ritual. You are still conscious. I have to say, the leaf ninjas are something else. You killed Kabuto. That gave me a pause. How did you know that? Because the anti-teleportation seal just went down. The cheeky bastard had the gall to smirk at me as he seemingly disappeared into nothing. Teleportation. My vision went red. With an explosive exhalation, I opened my eyes and instantly felt something was wrong. Brown eyes, shocked and clad in a green mask, looked onto me for a moment. It was far from the first time I had woken up during surgery. My Ison resistance was too high to ever be put under anesthesia successfully. For a minor operation, yes, high enough doses might work. For a multi-step, multi-stage reconstruction of the entire thorax, not a chance. Don't bother with ketamine. It doesn't work. Occlumency came as I forcefully cut myself from every single nerve sensation below my neck with exception of respiration. Kind of needed that one for talking and breathing. Tsunade was panicking, I idly noticed. She was still reaching for the ketamine. Fun stuff ketamine was. Surgeons used it when patients woke up in between surgery. One puff and all was forgotten. Anesthesiology was weird like that. Too high and patient dies, but too low and patient just might be waking in middle of surgery, if he goes down at all. I forced down my cerebral cortex stimulation. I was out like a light. A splash of water smashed my face, jolting me into wakefulness. Hand tied behind my back, Darkened room and shady-looking masked people filled the room to the brim. They were somewhat experienced given the seals on my chakra that I could feel. Add in an anti-magic field and I just might be worried. I would say they were rude but obvious. Sly Danzo wouldn't be stupid enough to have Anbu rip-offs whose masks literally said root. My magic came in great waves as I reached the surface thoughts of the person about to interrogate me. I instantly hit a mental barrier. Legimens. So it is true. Instantaneous ranged mind reading. Impressive. Very impressive. The man commented. You are just easily impressed. My wise Asura was rewarded with a backhand. I instantly cut off the broken nose from my sensory system. Occlumensis. The old good cop, bad cop routine. I can't believe they think it works. Who are you? They asked me. Homonium Revelios. Locator Mass. Why don't you tell me what you know and we will go from there? I was rewarded with another backhand. It was pointless. I could apparate out but that wouldn't leave me with much of information will it? I knew the location now however. Look kid, let me make this easy for you. You tell us what we want to know and I will let you go otherwise we are going to be here for a long time. What do you want to know? They seemed pleased. Somebody kill me already. I can't believe I am being interrogated by rookies. Time to bring reinforcement. The question is who? Somebody credible and suitably dramatic. Somebody who had a vested interest in my safety. I sighed. My magic instantly depleted by half as a long-distance transfiguration took place. Transfiguro Maximus. A piece of paper on Tsunade's desk transfigured itself before her eyes. How do you read the mind at this range? Write it down. You would require a mind reader to make sense of it. I spoke. Oh, I wouldn't worry about that. I am smart enough to know about it. Overconfidence. No. The mental barriers were evidence of studying the mind arts. A mind reader. A Yamanaka. Reversus Legimens. I began speaking and they listened carefully. I spoke of mind and the soulscape but not magic. I couldn't even if I wanted. Currently, Yamanaka Regi's mind was probing my mind and he himself didn't know it. Mind readers had a particular mindset and style, shaped like a spear to pierce into another mindscape. What I was essentially doing was forcing my mindscape on the edge of his spear. The connection made, it was a TTER of telling words that evoke the necessary image. Mention the Yamanaka and Regi thought of everything about his clan. Mention the mind arts and his failure to successfully learn anything of value came up. He was great in defense but had virtually no talent in the intrusive aspects. He had been manipulated with the promise of my technique's details. If Regi had not been part of the whole plot, I might have pitied him. The bad cop was Kira Saito, Regi's fiancée. A no-name ninja at Chunin level. She wasn't of value. Her Junin sensei however was. There was a pounding that grew progressively larger. My reinforcement had arrived. They found us. Hiro was panicking now. Kill the boy. Oh, he did not just say that. Not the killing part, that was normal. He just did not call me boy. I took that shit from nobody. Not even Dumbledore who was old enough to be my grandfather really on age basis alone. There was no way I was going to let a hack and his whore get away from this. Accio. My wands touched my hands. Crucio. My scream was soon overpowered by theirs as Tsunade came barraging through the 3 feet thick steel door like rampaging elephant. Overall, just another day in life of Naruto Slytherin. Sit down. Danzo more or less commanded his former teammates. Kaharu Udatane and Homaru Mitokuda were too stunned to decline. Just what in the hell were you guys thinking? It was seldom that Danzo was visibly angry. Sure, he had a temper but he rarely showed it. What games are you playing Danzo? Kaharu getting angry herself, fired back. Hell, hath no fury as a woman scorned. Home. Uru prepared to play peacemaker before Danzo spoke quietly. Kira Saito. A dead silence echoed in the room. I have had nothing to do with that traitor with years. Kaharu spoke firmly. Danzo gave her a look which betrayed nothing. Yet everything was clearly on the table. Danzo knew and now they knew he knew. The question was whether he had a solid proof or not. Gathering Slytherin's mind skills are important but force will not aid us. Danzo said seemingly going off a tangent. Especially when he can force his way through a perfect Yamanaka mind shield. The paling of both the elders confirmed Homaru's involvement. How long have you known about this? Homaru asked. Since the attack. Danzo admitted finally. And you have done nothing. Enraged, the kunoichi asked. Danzo frowned. Haven't you done more in the last 5 years than you two have done in your entire careers? It was harsh, but there had been consequences to the ill-thought-out plan. Slytherin had came out winning by an unprecedented margin. With his loyalty uncertain, a valuable pawn might be lost. Especially which might turn out to become a queen after all. So Danzo had to sacrifice his other pieces. Explain, Kaharu demanded. Danzo decided to humor her. Slytherin came to me 5 years ago with an offer. The astonished look tinged with hope on their face was disgusting. It costed me a lot and you will be redressing me for it. He reveled in their devastation. Konoha General, again, Kurenai Yuhi asked as she peeked inside the residence room. Forgive me the folly of youth, sensei. Naruto reached and passed on the cover to the resident who snuggled into it. Reaching for his pants and lab coat, he asked, I thought our session was not till day after tomorrow. I was worried about Izuna. He seems to be coughing a lot lately. She had the worried look that seems to be patented for every mother with a sick child. I am an internal medicine specialist, not a pediatrician. The only field of medicine he hated more was OB/GY. He could never stand women, children, or the unholy pregnant women. But surely you can look him over. He sighed and reached for his replica of an expensive Litman that he had transfigured. There was no way he was using the cheap plastic tube they called stethoscope here. Ellipsis. Well, his lungs are clear and his heart seems in excellent condition. Izuna looked like a replica of his mother with red eyes and black hair. Did he have a fever? Kurenai responded in negative. Upon asked expectoration while coughing, it prompted another denial. I doubt anything serious, most likely a normal viral. Some cough syrup is all I can recommend for him at this point. Instead of writing a prescription, Naruto reached and plucked out a bottle. One of the non-magical ones. He explained the dosage before continuing. As for you, are you sure the housewife is suiting up? Kurenai smiled at her student's concern before responding. Somebody has to take care of him and Sasuke. Ah yes, aft. Itachi had slaughtered her husband along with the rest of the clan. It had fallen to Kurenai to manage the remaining 2 Uchihas of Konoha. Do you blame me? Why would I? The massacre wasn't your fault. If you hadn't agreed to tutor me, you wouldn't have settled down. You once mentioned it last year. Kurenai's smile seemed a little sadder now. Well, I wouldn't have Izuna with me, would I then? Spare me the parental affection. It is beyond me. Naruto sneered. When you became a parent. Sensei, if I became a parent. He had listened to that line 1,000,000 times and more. Ellipsis. Even as she left, Naruto couldn't help but wonder about the changes that the last years had brought him. So many teachings and experimenting. New avenues of healing and so much to learn. So little time. Next patient. He spoke. Lung carcinoma. Would need magical potions. Next patient. Adenocarcinoma of esophagus. Next patient. Normal gastritis. Waste of time. Stupid rich nobles. Next patient. Tetralogy of Fallot. What the hell was a surgical referral doing here? Stupid secretary. He had hired her, but apparently, he couldn't fire her because she had been a lousy lay. Tsunade had not been understanding. Next patient. How many times would Jiraiya get testicular trauma? He referred him to surgery for a castration. Cannot have our balls busted if you don't have any. Next patient. And on it went. Just another day in life of Naruto Slytherin. Might Guy punched straight through his face. Straighten your back. He pushed himself up, taking care to straighten his back. A leg shot out towards Guy, who dodged under it and punched at his crotch. Naruto blocked it, feeling the bones in his hand rattle despite Guy holding back. Chakra flooded it, softening the blow a little. Guy intertwined the fingers with his, turning the blocked punch into a firm grip. This was bad, but the fact that Guy was going to break his other leg into pieces was worse. Gate of opening. Open. He wasn't a melee fighter. Despite all the training he had done, the pain was at its upper limit, and despite harsh years of training, 1 was all he could manage. But 1 was all he needed. Strength came, and with it speed. He punched at Guy's shoulder, successfully dislocating it inferiorly. He had intentionally punched it that way as shoulder was weakest against a downward force. But Guy ignored it and settled foe. Turning the entrapped arm into an axis and wrapping himself around his neck like a python. Jujutsu. He had lost. Done correctly, there was no way out of a Jujutsu hold. What were your mistakes? When he fights, there was no youth that defined him. Might Guy was a killing machine through and through. Should have aimed for your head. Guy nodded in agreement. A single shot like that shouldn't be wasted. Naruto flooded his body with healing chakra. Amazing. Guy's team was watching from far away. The kunoichi had said it, seemingly mesmerized by the greenish glow that seemed to emit from his body. Visible healing chakra. You must have impeccable vitality to maintain something like that. Guess what? The genius tag wasn't just for show. If he could see the healing magic that constrained the chakra, that would have been a problem. Just a quirk, Naruto said, placing a hand on Guy's shoulder, repairing it. Thread seemed to grow out of his body in a manner eerily similar to Kaku's. Use earth grudge fear but far smaller and finer. Traction seemed to come momentarily, reducing the fracture to nothing, while inflammation seemed to disappear under the influence of healing magic and chakra. If Kakuzu's unnatural fibers were power, Naruto's organic hair-like structures were control. Looks like our client has come, Neji mentioned, his Byakugan visible. On Guy's motion they left towards the Hokage tower. Even Naruto. You don't look like a ninja. Drunk and stupid. Tsunade already grated on Naruto's nerves, but he supposed he could understand where the man was coming from. Acroma. Entula black silk transmutated with glistening silver runes and a tall lithe built seemed to have given him an aristocratic look that was missing in almost all ninjas. As you both are traveling to Wave, we should all be traveling together, came the voice of what was probably his escort. And wasn't he a familiar sight? Ah, my rival. Figures. Guy would be excited to see his rival. Kakashi introduced him to Sasuke, Sakura and Narumi. Ah, you are the weird guy who hangs around with Auntie Tsunade. She was a bit dumb and nobody had filled her on the fact that the adult-looking guy was actually her twin brother. And while Naruto had been in on and off contact with the Namakazes, there had been so much to do in the last years that they had honestly slipped his mind. The only reason he even remained in contact with Tsunade was because she had been his contractor and was his sort of boss. That and the lovely apprentice of hers was a screamer. It is always the quiet ones. He would rate her only second to the freaky special Junin. If only she didn't have the weird obsession with snakes. Naruto would be last person to call someone on obsessing over the beautiful reptiles, but the day Ankh Mitarashi stopped trying to shove a python up his ass, he might just put a ring on that finger. It is nice to meet you, Namikaze-san, too. He politely greeted. She blustered. While it is interesting, Kakashi drawled. Do you all have your stuff? He looked pointedly at Naruto, who was clearly unburdened. I can create food or water if I want. Naruto for his part had been sort of waiting for an opportunity for close to a year now and couldn't see a reason not to take it. Meaning, Kakashi had to admit his interest was piqued before he felt it. Chakra came and so did magic. Life came and so did knowledge. His comprehension complete, he knew everything there was to know in the Konoha's library. Specifically, about Konoha's most famous bloodline. Now only application was left. With exertion of will, Naruto bent his very life force and connected to the life force of the planet. Every ninja and Anbu stopped to watch. Even the civilians and birds seemed to watch in the busy Hokage square. Naruto slammed his hand together. Mokuden. And with a force that defied explanation, nearby saplings seemed to come to live and the very earth parted as if bent to the will of life. In front of their astonished eyes, flower bloomed and the trees bore fruit. An apple fell into Naruto's waiting hand. Whether it was the satisfaction of a plan gone well, mirth at their dumbstruck expression, or perhaps just the taste of the fruit, Naruto's eyes glowed happily. Hopefully, it wouldn't take more than a week for the knowledge to spread around the globe. He would be back by then. Naruto left for the gates. The wave awaited them. The rest were too stunned to decline and merely followed. There were a lot of questions and no answers. Even as Danzo sat down in front of the entirety of the Konoha Council, he couldn't help but wonder the genius of Slytherin's actions. He had never expected this level of unslytherin guile. Frankly, Danzo was almost insulted at himself, at how impressed he felt. Slytherin had intentionally refrained from making any commitment to Konoha village in his years of dealing, either as a ninja or as a civilian. The long-range mind-reading capabilities were bad enough as they were, but a full-blown Mokuden. Mokuden was a legendary bloodline for a reason. The capacity to nullify what were essential weapons of mass destruction. Forget tilting, it completely obliterated the balance of powers. No doubt, many would love to add him here was just now only one problem. Danzo didn't believe any of that will happen. Slytherin had little to gain from actually joining any faction and everything to lose. Internally speaking, Konoha alone had multiple factions. The civilians, Minato and every single clan of Konoha. Oh, Danzo was aware of every one of them trying to gain some form of leverage over Naruto. He had been the one who had dealt with all of them after all. And that was why they were all here, wasn't it? The Junin have told me that you are quite close to my son. Is that correct? Minato asked him. This was the sole fundamental issue Danzo personally had with Minato as Hokage. He was strong but he was a family man. Danzo would have preferred a more solitary candidate, but Namikaze was still a mile better than the alternative. Even better than himself. Danzo had always trusted his now long dead sensei. If Tobirama Senju didn't believe him to be Hokage material, Danzo would trust him. Even if the Nadaime had been long dead. That is correct. Minato took a moment to think over his response, intentionally making the silence uncomfortable. And wasn't that something that he actually liked about Minato? He was smart. He was good at playing the word game. A rarity in world of ninjas. Fortunately, Danzo knew he was better. Unfortunately, Minato probably knew that too. I was unfamiliar that you knew Naruto-kun on one-on-one basis. Can you explain regarding your interactions with Naruto? Sarutobi said. He was sitting on the head table with Koharu and Homaru at his side. Smart of Namikaze to pit his own teammates against him. Unfortunately for Namikaze, Danzo was far more prepared. The Mokuden was something of a blind-sider, but knowing Slytherin meant he had known for years that this actual confrontation was years in making. Even in absence of Mokuden, Slytherin's mind penetration skills would one day lead him to uncovering way to valuable intel someday, in a scenario like this would have happened, one way or another. Now Danzo knew he had two options. Play long word games like he was used to and lose as he was virtually a single man against the entirety of Konoha Council. Or let loose the chaos and watch the council tear itself apart. Danzo smiled, intentionally waiting for the moment when Minato was taking a sip of water, before answering, I am his wingman. Minato choked on the water. The rest of council choked too despite the absence of water. Danzo continued smiling. When everyone seemed to have achieved a semblance of calm, it was Shikaku who asked the question. What do you mean by wingman? Danzo answered like talking to a 2-year-old, a guy who sets up another guy with dates. Dates as in? Sarutobi seemed faint. Danzo had actually forgotten that Hiruzen was something of a social conservative. Date as in the time, I set you up with Bawako after you got failed for 7th time. Perhaps, Hiruzen had been selected as Hokage out of pity. The sage knows that the Nadaime had not been impressed with his protege's inability to talk with women. So even as Hiruzen stammered out denials, Danzo wondered if the reason that he had not ended up a Hokage was because of his lady-killing skills back in the day. Looks like he dodged a bullet. As interesting as that is. Like always, Koharu was a mood killer. Enzo had told her that she was too old and wrinkly to play the Ice Queen routine, but of course he was the evil one. Nope, I don't imply that at all. Danzo had suspected for a long time that Slytherin was not 13 actually. The way he talked was more reminiscent of a man in his late 40s, but again he couldn't actually say that. Then can you expand on your role as a wingman? That was Shikaku Nara, just as sharp as his father and grandfather. Dangerous. It means that I set up meeting between him and women who request to meet him. What happens later is none of my concern. Seriously, you should know. Your niece was one of them. What? And there goes the Nara brains. A surprised genius was no different from a surprised fool. Utterly useless. Women who request to meet him. Hiyashi asked him. Danzo actually took a while to think over how to respond to that. Okay, you guys know about mind-reading thing? Danzo asked, finally opening up. It had always been something of an insider thing for everyone, but Danzo was pretty sure that every other village already knew about it. Slytherin himself had wanted to be sure of it. Danzo had been confused, but the amount of money that Naruto Ad offered was enough that Danzo had not asked any questions. Of course, he had charged other villages practically an extortion, but Slytherin probably had thought that one out. The Konoha Council looked at each other before realizing that everyone knew about what amounted to a practically open secret. They seemed to nod collectively. Well, the clans wanted to add him to their faction. A pin-drop silence could be heard. That is a grave accusation. Minato summarized. Danzo felt disappointed at the Hokage preemptively stopping another shouting session. I am not accusing anyone of anything. If a kunoichi wants to try their hand at bagging Slytherin for the sake of her clan, I say more power to her. Even as he said that, Danzo wondered if he was going to feature on this month issue of Feminist Today. And what role do you play in all this? Hiruzen asked. Danzo sighed before answering. Look, Naruto is a very private individual and I told him that he should socialize more, and when he admitted that he didn't know many people, I offered to set him up. And you did this, how many times? Hiruzen simply asked. 496 times. Danzo simply answered. Okay, so you did it. 496. Suddenly the absurdity of the number settled on everyone. I have been setting him up for 2 years. Danzo said as an explanation. Danzo knew the others may feel more than socially outraged, but Danzo had made a killing on those deals, and with the way he talked, it was very hard for Danzo to not treat Naruto like an adult. I didn't know there were that many kunoichi even inside village. Danzo couldn't help a smile at the sheer jealousy he could feel from the outraged Toad Sage. The look on the Slug Sage to his side, however, caused any form of amusement to quickly die down. Tsunade looked like she was wondering which part of him to cut off first. That kunoichi was dangerous, more than any other here, for sure. There have been many civilian women interested in meeting him too. Many of them as a matter of fact related to civilian counselors here. It was now civilian council looking uncomfortable. Slytherin was rich, Danzo didn't blame them. Why? Minato Namikaze was smart. He was the only one asking the question one should be asking. Unfortunately, that made him terribly predictable. Slytherin has practically no reason to be loyal to Konoha. I was trying to help it along. Play himself as a Konoha loyalist now. Would be useful later. Practically no reason. He is the Hokage's son. Somebody said. A fact that no one told him of. Danzo refuted. He doubted Slytherin was unaware, however, and playing that card was a barrel of monkeys. He is a member of Senju clan. The Senju clan head was smart. Unlike Tsunade, he was a civilian, but unlike her, he was at the very least good at the talking game. He who strikes first, strikes twice. The custody battle was inevitable, might as well go for a preemptive strike. On what basis? One of the civilians challenged. His daughter was particularly enamored with the Slytherin, if Danzo remember correctly. Mokuden. He didn't say. Duh, but everyone heard it regardless. Can it be like Tenzo? Kaharu asked him. Another open secret amongst Konoha Council. It was Tsunade who shook her head before answering. No Senju or Uzumaki blood could tolerate Orochimaru's infusion process. They have too much internal resistance to my grandfather's chakra. It is much more likely to awaken Mokuden on its own. And awakening on its own meant a likely full-blown variant, unlike Tenzu's remarkably weakened variant. So, he does belong with TTHE clan bloodline act. The Senju clan head seemed slightly smug. Danzo decided to correct him. Unfortunately, he is not a Konoha citizen. And the chaos erupted once more. Danzo smiled in midst of it all, realizing just why Naruto liked doing this so much. The end. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.